Chapter 1. Elara. Please tell me that hideous charcoal dress stayed in San Francisco. Jax did not lead with a hello. He did not ask about the turbulence over the Rockies, or if the tiny, salt-crusted bag of pretzels from the galley had been enough to sustain my crumbling constitution. He went straight for the jugular, his voice crackling through the phone with the kind of practiced, surgical disdain only a best friend could master. A sharp step forward in the security line brought me closer to the humming metal detector. The linoleum floor of the terminal felt tacky beneath my sneakers, a physical manifestation of the stagnant air. The atmosphere in JFK was a thick, pressurized blend of burnt coffee, industrial-strength floor wax, and the frantic, sour sweat of travelers caught in the gears of a midday delay. It made my skin feel a size too small, as if the humidity were a garment I couldn't shed. "It is a classic," I murmured, my voice lost in the rhythmic thud-thud of heavy suitcases hitting the conveyor belt. It is understated. It screams sophisticated forensic accountant, not girl whose life just became a public interest story. Jax's scoff was so loud it likely rattled the windows of my now empty apartment 3,000 miles away. It screams bingo night at the retirement home. Elara. It says I have given up on the concept of joy and have accepted a life of auditing spreadsheets until my corneas actually bleed. And because I am currently the only person standing between you and a complete social blackout, I am knee-deep in packing peanuts in your bedroom. I'm looking for the emerald silk slip dress, the one that proves you still possess a rhythmic pulse. I'm shoving it in my carry-on and meeting you at the apartment. A flush heated my face, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stifling, recycled air of the terminal. Why are you even in my apartment? And shouldn't you be at your desk? I am on a mission of mercy. Also, why did you answer? You should be 30,000 feet in the air by now, fleeing the scene of your impending emotional disaster at Mach speed. The gate agent held out a manicured hand, and the boarding pass slid toward her. The paper felt crisp, a physical anchor to the reality of this flight. I am going home for a wedding I despise. My flight is delayed an hour. It is a sign from the universe, a blinking neon warning, that I should just turn around and go back to my quiet, safe, boring life. The jet bridge functioned as a wind tunnel of humid air and the distant rhythmic roar of jet engines. Jax's face flickered onto the screen via FaceTime. He had swapped his professional work glasses for a pair of neon pink frames that looked ridiculous against his sharp, narrow jawline and the chaos of my half-packed bedroom in the background. Are those new? These match your impending sense of adventure. Jax shrugged, his grin wide and mischievous. I thought your flight took off at noon? Delayed. Mechanical issues. Another sign. If you break anything in those boxes, Jax, I am charging you compound interest. The moving company picks them up tomorrow morning. He ignored the threat, leaning closer to the camera as he rummaged through a stack of lace. Ooh. When did we acquire this little black number? It is practically translucent. Is this for the wedding or the inevitable, world-shattering rebound? Put my underwear back, Jax. I am just saying, this is a strong choice. If the emerald dress doesn't do the trick, this might actually make Julian have a stroke right at the altar, which, honestly, would be the best wedding gift you could give me. Or the city. The cabin of the plane smelled of stale upholstery and lavender-scented sanitizer. I found my row, the heavy thud of my bag echoing in the overhead bin as I shoved it into place with a strength born of pure, unadulterated frustration. I settled into the seat, the leather cool against the back of my legs. My mother had meddled, of course, using her latest divorce settlement to upgrade me to first class. Almost immediately, a flight attendant appeared with a tray of crystal flutes that caught the overhead lead light in sharp, fractured prisms. Orange juice or champagne before we depart? Champagne. Definitely champagne. I needed the bubbles to settle the frantic, electric buzzing in my chest. She offered a sympathetic smile, the kind reserved for people who looked like they were heading toward a funeral rather than a celebration. Nervous flyer? Going home for a wedding. The groom is my ex-fiancé. He is marrying my stepsister. Her eyebrows shot toward her hairline, her hand pausing as she refilled my glass to the brim, the liquid pale and effervescent. Oh, honey, you are a much better person than I am. I would have accidentally lost the invitation and moved to a remote corner of another continent. I don't have much of a choice. My mother is the hostess, and she views attendance as a binding legal contract. The flight attendant set the half-full bottle on the tray table with a conspiratorial wink. The runway is backed up. We missed our slot, so we will be sitting here for a while. My name is Clara. If you need a refill or a shoulder to vent on, just buzz. The first glass disappeared before the plane even taxied toward the runway. By the time the engines roared to life and the ground fell away, a familiar, floaty numbness had settled into my bones. But as the clouds thickened into a sea of white outside the window, the numbness turned into a sharp, jagged edge of loneliness. A message from Julian sat in the inbox, a digital weight I couldn't shake. Hey. I know things are awkward, but I'd really like to talk when you get into town. Maybe we could grab a drink at the Lantern? Please don't tell your stepsister. I just need to see you. A hot, metallic tang of anger filled my mouth. Julian was safety. Julian was a medium roast coffee and a 3-year plan that had ended in a betrayal so cliché it felt scripted. I didn't want to be the jealous ex-fiancé. I wanted to be someone Julian wouldn't even recognize. A woman who didn't live her life within the margins of a spreadsheet. I dozed off somewhere over Nebraska, waking only when the snack cart rattled past, the smell of salted nuts and coffee filling the cabin. While I waited for the tray to be cleared, I connected to the plane's Wi-Fi. A text from Jax popped up immediately. Who is the best friend in the world? There was a photo attached. He was beaming, holding up a pair of silk panties that matched the emerald dress perfectly. He was right. I didn't need to lure Julian back. I needed a clean break. I needed a stranger who didn't know my GPA, my tax bracket, or my favorite type of artisan coffee. I needed a night that belonged entirely to the woman I was becoming, not the girl I had been forced to be. I opened the browser, my fingers hovering over the keys. Best places to meet someone in Manhattan for a one-night stand. The results were clinical, depressing, and reeked of desperation. I scrolled through listicles of rooftop bars and basement lounges until an animated ad flickered on the sidebar. A bird fluttered inside a gilded cage. The door creaked open, and a deep crimson finch took flight, its wings beating against the glass of the screen. Underneath, the text was simple. The Omen. True chemistry. No games. I clicked. It wasn't a standard app. There were no profiles to swipe, no blurry gym selfies to decipher. It was a gated community. The psychological battery took 30 minutes of my life, probing into corners I usually kept locked. It asked about salary importance, power dynamics, and my physiological reaction to being watched. It was intrusive. It was fascinating. It was exactly what I needed. I checked boxes for a partner with more experience. A man who wouldn't ask permission to exist. I confessed that I had spent my entire adult life being the safe choice for a man who turned out to be a coward. By the time I hit submit, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. An hourglass appeared on the screen, the sand falling in slow, deliberate grains that felt like a countdown. Then, a message flashed in bold, stark white. We have found your match. Just one, a singular, uncompromising result. I clicked the link, but the profile that appeared was a total void. There was no photo, no name, no bio detailing a love for hiking or weekend brunches. There was only a pseudonym that felt like a low, dangerous hum in the back of the throat. Vesper. The data visualization indicated a near-perfect psychological overlap, a high-velocity storm meeting a hidden fire. The bio was shorter than mine: interests, high-stakes negotiation, deep sea diving, and truth. Languages, sarcasm and silence, looking for someone who isn't afraid of the dark. A chime echoed in my ears, a notification from the app that made the hair on my arms stand up. Vesper, you took a long time with that questionnaire, Elara. Was it the question about control that gave you pause? My breath hitched, the air in the first-class cabin suddenly feeling very thin. The screen dimmed, reflecting my own wide-eyed shock and the deep crimson of the lipstick Jax had insisted I wear. I looked at the mirror in the tiny airplane bathroom 10 minutes later. My hair was a mess of waves, my green eyes bright with a frantic, nervous energy. I was terrified. I was out of my league, and I was going to meet a ghost. Chapter 2. Elara. The heavy tilt of the aircraft signaled the final descent, a slow, grinding crawl through the iron-gray clouds masking the New York skyline. Outside the porthole, the Atlantic remained a vast sheet of hammered lead, cold and indifferent to the frantic buzzing beneath my skin. The plush leather of the first-class seat pressed against my spine as the engines rattled through the cabin, the vibration traveling up into my jaw. The phone in my palm glowed with a predatory brightness, the icon of the Raven pulsing like a heartbeat. Most people spent the final hour of a long-haul flight drowning in mindless social media scrolling or a safe, predictable rom-com. The reality was much darker. My fingers navigated a restricted corner of the network, a gated digital playground designed for the sharks and the titans who viewed standard dating apps as shallow meat markets. The Omen. Usually, the role of the good daughter and the reliable forensic accountant fit like a second skin. I was the woman who played by the books and waited 3 years for a ring that never materialized. But the box for a partner who demands total submission was checked, and a hot shiver of rebellion raced through my marrow. The desire for a man who wouldn't ask permission to exist, a man who would dictate the very air in the room, burned through the last of my restraint. The sand in the digital hourglass on the screen finally settled. Match found. Vesper. The name felt like a secret, a low hum in the back of the throat. The profile lacked a photo, but the data visualization indicated a near-perfect psychological overlap. Vesper was a high-velocity storm, unyielding and entirely uncompromising. The air in the cabin grew thin, charged with the scent of ozone and anticipation. Before a greeting could even be typed, the screen blinked with a message: Vesper. You have a curious mind, Elara. Most women lie to the algorithm. They claim to want equality while their pulse spikes at the thought of a tether. You were honest. A frantic rhythm hammered against my ribs. The sheer audacity of his opening made the breath catch. He wasn't merely making conversation. He was dissecting a soul from 1,000 miles away. Elara. Maybe I am just tired of making decisions for people who never bothered to appreciate them. Vesper, a common ailment for women with high IQs and low-velocity lives. Tonight is the antidote, if you have the spine for it. Elara, I did not join this network to be bored. Vesper, good. There is a place called the Vault, downtown. It has no sign, only a heavy iron door with a brass handle shaped like a lion's head. Be there at 10. Do not bring Jax. Do not wear the charcoal dress. Cold sweat broke out along my hairline, a damp chill that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. The knowledge of Jax and the dress felt like a physical weight, a phantom hand on my shoulder. The cabin remained a row of snoring businessmen and plastic trays. No tailored suit lurked in the shadows of the galley, yet the intrusion was absolute. The wheels hit the tarmac with a violent jolt, the screech of rubber on pavement echoing the internal scream currently being suppressed. The lights of JFA blurred into long neon streaks against the rain-slicked windows. By the time the cab pulled to the curb, the New York humidity hit like a wet towel, thick with the scent of exhaust, salt air, and old brick. A black car took the place of the yellow cabs, the GP's coordinates locked onto a destination that didn't exist on public maps. Gramercy Park remained haughty, quiet, and smelling of damp ivy. The new apartment was a sterile box of white marble and floor-to-ceiling glass, a parting gift from my mother's latest divorce settlement. Jax was already sprawled across a velvet sofa, wearing a silk kimono and holding a martini with a look of pure judgment. "You look like you just witnessed a crime, Elara." He didn't stand, merely gestured with his glass toward a garment bag hanging on the bedroom door, "or like you are about to commit one." The suitcase hit the floor, the heavy thud punctuating the silence of the foyer. "I am going out." Jax finally sat up, his eyebrows disappearing into his messy blonde fringe. "It is 9 o'clock on a Thursday. You just stepped off a 6-hour flight. Where could you possibly be going that requires that particular look in your eye?" The bedroom door clicked shut, locking out his interrogation. The garment bag ripped open, and the emerald silk slip dress slithered through my fingers like liquid heat. It was indecent. The neckline plunged into a dangerous V, and the back consisted of nothing but a series of thin, crisscrossing threads. The travel clothes fell away, the fabric of the leggings feeling like a shackle finally shed. I stepped into the silk, the cool material molding to curves and highlighting every line usually worked so hard to hide. The reflection in the full-length mirror was a stranger, someone sharper, more reckless, and entirely unrecognizable. A layer of deep crimson lipstick went on, the scent of vanilla and wax grounding me for a fleeting second. The vault sat at the end of a cobblestone alleyway that smelled of wet trash and expensive cologne. The iron door was exactly as Vesper had described, the brass lion's head cool and heavy beneath my palm. A single knock was swallowed by the thick metal. A small slit in the door slid open. A pair of eyes, hard and unblinking, scanned the space from head to toe. The lock turned with a heavy industrial thud. The air inside was a complete sensory assault. It was heavy, suffocatingly warm, and thick with the scent of oud, expensive tobacco and something sharp like metallic copper. Low, thrumming bass vibrated through the floorboards, rattling the bones in my feet. The lighting was non-existent, save for a few amber flickers from wall sconces that cast long, distorted shadows across the grit-covered floor. The silk of the dress rustled against my thighs with every step deeper into the shadows. The room hummed with low murmurs and the occasional sharp clink of ice against glass. People moved like wraiths in the dim light, their faces obscured by the gloom and the smoke. At the far end of the room, a lone man sat at a corner table. He didn't move as the distance closed. He sat with a terrifying stillness, one hand wrapped around a glass of amber liquid, the other resting flat on the dark wood of the table. No tie constricted his neck. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar to reveal the jagged edge of a tattoo crawling up his throat. The air around him felt different, heavier, more electric, as if he were the center of a storm. My heart climbed into my throat, threatening to choke me. The name wasn't necessary. Vesper. He didn't look up immediately. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his drink, the movement of his throat rhythmic and mesmerizing. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes hit with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just dark. They were a bottomless, obsidian void that pulled the very air from my lungs. "Sit down, Elara." His voice was a low, raspy velvet that vibrated through my chest. "I did not tell you to stand there and tremble." The mahogany chair was rough against my palms as I gripped it, knuckles white with the strain of holding myself upright. I am not trembling. He leaned forward, the amber light catching the sharp line of his jaw and the faint, jagged scar that ran through the tail of his left eyebrow. He smelled of rain and something dangerous. My knees felt like water. Lying is a poor way to start a night like this. I can hear your heart from across the table. It is frantic, like a bird hitting glass. He stood up then, and the sheer scale of him was suffocating. He was a mountain of tailored wool and cold intent. He moved around the table with a predator's grace, his presence crowding the space until my head tilted back just to keep his eyes in focus. His fingers were cold as ice as they brushed against the skin of my neck, tracing the line of my pulse. The contact electrified me, a sharp spark of heat radiating down to my toes and leaving me breathless. "You are out of your league, little accountant." He murmured the words against the shell of my ear, his breath hot and smelling of bourbon. "You came here looking for a thrill, but you have no idea how deep the water is." My head turned, lips inches from his, the tension so thick it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I think I am a very fast learner. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but his eyes remained ice cold. We will see. His hand dropped from my neck, leaving the skin tingling and exposed. He reached into his pocket and tossed a thick stack of bills onto the table without a glance. "We are leaving." Wait. I blinked, the sudden shift in momentum causing a stumble. "Leaving? We just got here. I do not play games in public, Elara, and I do not share my toys." His grip on my elbow was firm and unyielding as he led the way back through the shadows toward the iron door. My mind screamed to run, to go back to the safety of spreadsheets and white marble, but my body sang a different song, a dark, desperate melody that only he could hear. Tonight, the girl who followed the rules was officially dead. Chapter 3. Silas. The air inside the vault is a stagnant, heavy weight, thick with the scent of expensive, oud, stale smoke, and the metallic tang of filtered oxygen that never quite reaches the lungs. I sit in the far corner booth where the shadows are at their most predatory, my back against the tufted leather that smells of age and buried secrets. This establishment is a ghost on paper, registered through 3 different shell companies in the Caymans. But in reality, it is my watchtower. It is the place where I peel back the layers of the city to see who is truly hungry and who is just playing a part. Usually, the digital matches from The Omen are a choreographed waste of my dwindling patience. Bored socialites and tech heiresses lie to the algorithms, checking boxes for high-risk thrills while their actual tolerance for the dark is lower than a basement floor. But this profile was an anomaly. The data didn't just lean into the abyss, it seemed to be searching for a way to dominate it. Elara, the name carries the weight of a soft exhale, a gentle sound that has been rattling around my skull for 48 hours. The heavy iron door at the end of the cobblestone alleyway groans on its hinges, a harsh, industrial sound that cuts through the thrumming bass vibrating the floorboards. A sliver of street lamp orange slices through the gloom, and then she is there. She isn't merely a woman walking into a club. She is a lightning strike hitting a room full of damp candles. The emerald silk of her dress slithers against her skin with every tentative step, catching the low amber glow of the wall sconces and highlighting a silhouette that looks too clean for this floor. Her presence is a jagged contrast to the curated grit of the room. She looks like she was carved from marble and dipped in liquid heat. She approaches the table with her chin held high, a posture clearly designed to mask the frantic, uneven rhythm of her pulse. Fear is a scent I can track in total darkness, and she is drenched in it, yet she moves forward anyway. That is the hook. Most people run from the storm. She is walking straight into the eye of it, with a notebook in her hand, and a fire in her green eyes that matches the silk on her back. "Sit down, Elara." My voice feels like gravel being crushed under a boot, a low vibration that competes with the thumping subwoofers. "I did not tell you to stand there and tremble." She doesn't sit. Instead, her fingers white-knuckle the back of the mahogany chair, her knuckles as pale as the cream of her skin. Her gaze remains fixed on mine with a stubborn, terrifying defiance that makes the jagged scar at the corner of my brow twinge. I am not trembling. The lie is charming, but entirely useless. I lean forward, the ice in my bourbon clinking softly against the crystal. Up close, her skin is flawless, flushed a guilty crimson along her neck and chest. She smells of vanilla and rain, a scent that shouldn't belong in a place that thrives on decay. I can hear the frantic thud of her heart from 3 feet away, a desperate, trapped bird rhythm that tells me everything her mouth won't. The bartender, a man whose silence I pay for in gold, slides a glass toward her. She reaches for it, her hand shaking just enough to betray the lie, but I raise a single finger. Cancel it. Elara's head snaps toward me, her eyes flashing with a sharp, indignant spark. I am an adult. I can order a drink. Not in my presence. I won't touch a woman who needs liquid courage to look me in the eye. If you want to be here, you will be here with your head clear and your senses sharp. I want to know exactly what you are consenting to when the air gets thin and the rules start to break. I can see the gears grinding behind her eyes, a frantic search for the exit or perhaps a witty retort. I stand up, the movement slow and deliberate. I am a mountain of tailored wool and cold intent, and as I move around the table, the space between us evaporates. She has to tilt her head back, her throat exposed and beautiful in the dim light, looking like an altar I'm tempted to burn. "Do you even know where you are? This isn't a standard dating service, little accountant. The Omen is for people with specific tastes, people who find peace and surrender and truth in the things that hurt." The realization hits her like a physical blow. Her pupils dilate, swallowing the green of her irises until there is only dark, wide-eyed shock. She is an accidental tourist. A girl who checked boxes she didn't understand because she was angry at an ex or bored with her ledgers. She is a virgin in a den of vipers. I reach out, my thumb tracing the frantic line of her jaw. Her skin is electrified, a sharp spark of heat jumping between us that makes the hair on my arms stand up. The contact is brief, but it confirms the data. She is soft. She is untouched. She is exactly the kind of thing I would break if I let her stay 1 minute longer. You are out of your league. You came here for a thrill, but you have no idea how deep the water is. She tries to speak, her lips parting, but no sound emerges. I pull my hand away, the absence of her skin leaving a cold ache in my palm that I haven't felt in years. I reach into my pocket and toss a stack of $100 bills onto the dark wood of the table. "We are leaving." "Leaving?" Her voice is a breathless whisper, lost in the scent of bourbon and sandalwood. "We just got here." I do not play games in public, and I certainly do not share what belongs to me with a room full of ghosts. I grip her elbow, my hold firm but careful not to bruise. I lead her through the shadows toward the heavy iron door, my body a shield against the eyes of the wraiths nursing their drinks in the corners. The grit on the floor crunches beneath my boots, a harsh rhythm that matches the heavy thud of my heart. The humidity of the alleyway hits us like a physical weight, thick with the smell of wet pavement and the low hum of the city's restless energy. Rainwater slicks the cobblestones, reflecting the neon hunger of the distant skyline in fractured streaks of blue and pink. Elara shivers beside me, the emerald silk of her dress offering no protection against the bite of the midnight wind. Wait here. My car is around the corner. She stands by the lion-headed door, a small, vibrant figure against the blackened brick. She looks fragile, yet she doesn't run. She stands her ground even as the thunder rumbles in the distance, a low warning that mirrors the tension in my own gut. I signal to the black SUV idling at the curb. The headlights cut through the gloom like twin blades, illuminating the swirling mist. This is the moment I should put her in a cab and send her back to her white marble box in Gramercy Park. I should forget the way her skin felt under my thumb, the sharp electric promise of a woman who has no idea what she's inviting into her bed. But I've always had a problem with self-control when it comes to things that look too beautiful to exist. My fingers itch to reach out again, to pull her into the shadows and see if that defiance in her eyes tastes like honey or iron. Get in, Elara. I open the door, the leather interior smelling of cedar, old money, and the cold efficiency of a world she hasn't earned yet. She hesitates for a heartbeat, her hand hovering over the handle, her breath hitching in a way that makes the silk over her chest strain. Where are we going? To find out if you really have the spine for the dark, or if you are just another girl playing dress-up to spite a man who wasn't worth your time. She slides into the seat, the silk of her dress rustling with a sound that makes my teeth ache. I shut the door, the heavy, muffled thud echoing through the alleyway like a gavel hitting a bench. I walk around the front, the rain beginning to fall in earnest, the cold droplets hitting my face and doing nothing to dampen the fire she just lit in my blood. The night has just begun, and I am already breaking every rule I've ever made for my own survival. Chapter 4. Elara. The French fries on the table between us were cold, limp and glistening with a sheen of congealing grease, but Jax didn't seem to notice as he doubled over. His laughter was a sharp, barking sound that sliced through the low hum of the late-night diner, drawing several pointed, annoyed glances from the exhausted patrons nursing their graveyard shift coffee. The air here was thick and stagnant, a heavy blend of old frying oil, industrial-strength floor cleaner, and the faint, sweet rot of trash waiting for the morning pickup. It was a jarring, graceless shift from the sandalwood, expensive bourbon, and lingering danger that had clung to Silas just an hour ago. You really walked into a high-stakes den of inequity thinking it was a standard hinge date. Jax wheezed, wiping a stray tear from behind the neon-pink frames of his glasses. Elara, you are a marvel. A forensic genius who can track a hidden offshore account through a labyrinth of shell companies, yet you fail to recognize a lifestyle club when the owner is practically breathing down your neck? The cracked red vinyl of the booth bit into my thighs as I slumped against the seat. The emerald silk slip dress felt like a costume that had overstayed its welcome, the thin fabric offering zero protection against the drafty air. The gaze of the man from the vault still felt branded into the small of my back, a phantom heat that refused to dissipate. He paid for my drink and escorted me to the curb like a piece of evidence he didn't want to contaminate. Jax. He didn't even offer a last name. He just treated me like a broken calculator and signaled for a black car to take me back to my sanctuary. Jax finally caught his breath, his expression shifting from mocking hilarity to a strange, quiet kind of awe. And you are still a virgin. At 24. In this city. It is like finding a pristine, unopened VHS tape of a blockbuster movie in the middle of a literal landfill. You are a vintage relic. Cookie, a rare collectible that doesn't understand its own market value. Heat radiated from my neck to the tips of my ears, a guilty crimson flush that the fluorescent lights of the diner only served to highlight. Shut up. It isn't as if I am waiting for a white knight to sweep me off my feet. I just haven't found anyone who didn't feel like a tedious chore or a line item on a budget. And then I encounter a guy who feels like a literal natural disaster, and he dismisses me like a sheltered toddler playing dress-up. We eventually abandoned the diner, stepping out into the humid New York night. The yellow cab smelled of stale tobacco, pine-scented cardboard, and the frantic energy of 1,000 previous passengers. Outside the grimy windows, the city blurred into a kaleidoscope of neon rain and iron, the skyline a jagged set of teeth biting into the low-hanging clouds. We pulled up to the sleek, glass-fronted monolith in the heights, my mother's latest peace offering, a white marble box in the sky purchased with the spoils of her fourth husband's desperation to keep her quiet during their public divorce. The elevator ride was a silent, pressurized climb, the hum of the machinery vibrating through the thin soles of my heels. When the doors slid open, the scent of expensive lilies, high-end hairspray, and unadulterated ambition hit like a physical wall. My mother Mia was draped across a velvet chaise lounge, a crystal flute of champagne in one hand and a gold-plated smartphone in the other. There she is, my little auditor back from the wild. Mia didn't bother to stand, but her eyes, sharp and transparent as glass, dissected me from head to toe. The emerald is a daring choice, Elara, though your hair is a complete catastrophe. You look like you were caught in a localized wind tunnel. The weight of the day settled into my bones. I am tired, Mom. I have been traveling for 10 hours and my brain is currently at capacity. Nonsense. You have a monumental day on Monday. Mia waved the nail technician away and stood, her movements as graceful and practiced as a predator in silk. I have finalized your placement. You will be interning at Sterling-Vane. It is the most aggressive private equity firm in this hemisphere. They do not merely manage money, they dominate it. Arthur Vance is a senior director there, and he has promised to keep an eye on your progress. Sterling-Vane, the name hit my ears like a threat. Even in San Francisco, their reputation preceded them. Sharks in tailored armor known for hostile takeovers and a total, chilling lack of empathy. The next evening was a grueling marathon of social performance. The rehearsal dinner for my stepsister's wedding was staged at a rooftop lounge that cantilevered over the Hudson River. The wind was biting, whipping the sharp scent of salt and ozone across the deck. I stood in a darkened corner, clutching a glass of tepid, sparkling water, watching Julian charm the room. You look like you are contemplating a very long walk off a very short ledge. Julian stood beside me, the scent of peppermint and expensive laundry detergent preceding him. He reached out to touch my arm, his fingers warm and steady, but the contact was static-free. It is just a lot of noise, Julian. Your mother informs me you are starting at Sterling-Vane. That is a brutal environment for someone with your delicate sensibilities. If the pressure becomes suffocating, let me know. I have considerable pull over there. His condescension was a dull, rhythmic ache in the back of my head. I didn't require his pull. I required an exit strategy. My attention drifted toward the entrance as a new group of men arrived, their entry shifting the atmospheric pressure of the rooftop like a cold front slamming into a heat wave. They were dressed in charcoal and black suits that functioned like armor, their movements synchronized and predatory. In the center of the phalanx was my stepfather, Arthur, looking uncharacteristically haggard. He was talking to a man whose back was to me, a man whose shoulders were broad enough to effectively block out the New York City skyline. Arthur turned, gesturing toward our quiet corner with a forced, cheerful vigor. Elara, come here, sweetheart. I want you to meet the man in charge. The distance closed, and the man in the center turned around with slow, terrifying grace. The air didn't just leave my lungs, it evaporated. The scar at his brow was a jagged silver line under the moonlight. His eyes were obsidian, cold, bottomless, and locked onto mine. I froze. My brain, usually a high-speed processor of data and facial recognition, stuttered. I knew the name Silas Vane, of course. Every accountant in the country knew the name. But Silas Vane was a cipher. He was notoriously press-shy, a man who employed an entire department of digital cleaners to scrub his image from the public domain. There were no candid shots of him on Forbes, no social media presence, just a void where a face should be. He had remained a ghost to the public, a legend whispered about in boardrooms but never seen. Until now, until he was standing 5 feet away from me, and I realized the Vesper who had dismantled my psyche in a basement club was the very man who held the keys to my career. Silas. Arthur beamed, entirely oblivious to the fact that my heart was currently attempting to kick its way out of my chest cavity. Elara, this is Silas Vane, the CEO of Sterling-Vane, the man you will be working for on Monday morning. Silas reached out, his hand large and calloused as it enveloped mine. His skin was ice cold, yet the heat that radiated from the contact made the edges of my vision blur. It is a pleasure to meet you, Elara. His voice was a low, raspy friction, a sound harvested from the deepest shadows of the night. I have heard you possess an exceptionally sharp mind for numbers. I look forward to seeing how you handle the real-world pressure. The emerald dress felt like a target painted on my skin. Monday was no longer an internship. It was a reckoning. Chapter 5. Silas. The air on the rooftop is thin, biting with a salt-heavy wind that whips off the Hudson and rattles the crystal flutes on the passing catering trays. These corporate galas function as choreographed exercises in hollow smiles and expensive cologne, a stage where my senior directors play at being titans of industry while I privately decide which of them is currently skimming from the family coffers. My dual life is a delicate, bloody architecture. By day, I am the icy architect of Sterling-Vane, but beneath the charcoal wool of this suit, I am the head of a legacy that doesn't answer to the SEC. The weight of that legacy is heavy tonight. I have 3 shipping containers currently held at the Brooklyn terminal under a random customs inspection that feels anything but random. The federal probe into our logistics arm is deepening, and the men who used to fear the Vane name are starting to smell blood in the water. I should be in a basement in Queens, breaking the fingers of the informant who leaked our manifest. Instead, I am standing on a manicured terrace, nursing a 20-year-old bourbon and pretending to care about a hostile takeover in the tech sector. Arthur Vance, a man who has managed to keep his ledgers remarkably clean for a decade, hovers at my elbow. His posture presents a mix of practiced pride and a very subtle, underlying tremor of nerves, a scent that only a predator recognizes for what it is. I know why he's nervous. He knows the family business is undergoing a transition. He knows that the transition of power from my father to me hasn't been without its casualties. He thinks I am here to celebrate his latest acquisition. In reality, I am here to vet the new blood and remind the old guard that my shadow reaches far beyond the boardroom and into the very marrow of this city's underworld. My world is built on the cold architecture of control. Every person on this deck is a piece of raw data I have already processed, categorized, and filed away under useful or disposable. Arthur gestures toward a corner of the deck where the lighting is soft and the jazz band's rhythmic thrum is most insistent, the bass vibrating through the soles of my shoes. Silas, there is someone I would like you to meet. My stepdaughter, Elara. She is starting the internship program on Monday, top of her class at Stanford. I turn, the glass of bourbon heavy and cold in my palm, prepared to offer the standard, disinterested nod. The world doesn't just stop, it shatters into a million jagged, brilliant fragments of glass. The girl from the club stands 5 feet away. She is a vision in emerald silk that slithers against her skin with every shallow breath she takes, catching the moonlight and making every other woman in the room look like a charcoal sketch. Her presence hits like a physical blow to the solar plexus, knocking the air from my lungs and replacing it with the intoxicating, localized scent of vanilla and rain. It is her, The accidental tourist from the vault, the girl with the bird-like heart and the spine of a soldier who walked into my shadows and survived. My pulse, usually a steady, icy rhythm, skips a jagged beat before hammering a warning against my ribs. A heat that has nothing to do with the humid night air surges through my veins, a primitive, possessive territorialism I haven't felt in a decade. Elara looks like she is contemplating a leap into the dark river below. Her face is a mask of wide-eyed shock, her lips parted just enough to let out a ghost of a breath that I can almost taste from this distance. Beside her stands a man who looks like he was grown in a laboratory for bland bureaucrats, a prosecutor, if the badge-heavy ego and the stiff navy blazer radiating off him are any indication. He has a hand on her arm, a claim that makes my jaw lock so tight the bone aches, with the need to snap something brittle. A prosecutor. Julian. I know his name. I know his conviction rate. And I know that his father is one of the men trying to put a noose around my family's neck. The irony is a bitter, metallic tang in my mouth. She is standing with the very law that wants to dismantle my legacy, yet she's wearing the emerald silk I watched her tremble in 48 hours ago. Arthur beams, entirely oblivious to the fact that the atmospheric pressure between his boss and his stepdaughter has just become highly combustible. Elara, this is Silas Vane, the CEO. I don't blink, I don't smile. I let my face settle into a mask of cold, unyielding granite. I am a titan of industry on the surface, and a predator in the dark, and right now both sides of me are at war over the emerald-clad girl standing in the eye of my storm. She is an intern. She is a subordinate. She is the daughter of one of my most loyal soldiers. She is also the only woman who has occupied every corner of my mind for the last 48 hours, a recurring glitch in my carefully programmed reality. I had dismissed her as a fleeting curiosity, a girl who wandered into the wrong room and saw too much. But seeing her here, in the light, under the protection of a man who serves me, changes the equation entirely. She isn't just a witness, she's a complication that has worked its way under my skin. I reach out, my hand large and calloused as it closes around hers. Her skin is ice cold, yet the heat that radiates from the contact is an electric surge that travels straight to my gut, unmooring my legendary restraint. She is trembling, her heart hammering so violently against her ribs that I can feel the vibration through her palm. It is a frantic, desperate rhythm that matches the fire in her green eyes, a fire that says she hates me for knowing her secrets and wants me to keep them anyway. It is a pleasure to meet you, Elara. My voice is a low, raspy friction, a sound harvested from the deepest shadows of the night. I've heard you have a very sharp mind for finding things that are hidden. I look forward to seeing how you handle the pressure of our environment. I don't let go of her hand immediately. I let the silence stretch, a heavy, suffocating pressure that forces the prosecutor to shift on his feet. The man is a bug I could crush with a single phone call, an irritant in a cheap suit, but Elara is a variable I didn't account for. She is a forensic accounting genius. She is being brought in to look at the very books I spend my nights obfuscating with the blood of my enemies and the ink of my family's legacy. If she finds the discrepancies, if she digs too deep into the Zurich accounts or the Dockland shipping manifests, she becomes a liability. My internal monologue is a war zone. One side wants to send her as far away as possible, to the London office, to the West Coast, anywhere she can't find the rot in the foundation. The other side, the darker, hungrier side of the Vane name, wants to drag her into the center of the storm. I want to see if she can handle the weight of my world without breaking. I want to know if that emerald silk covers a heart capable of understanding the things I have to do to keep the family safe. If she is a forensic genius, she will find the shadows. I just have to decide if I'm going to silence her for it, or make her the keeper of the keys. Arthur continues to drone on about her accolades and her top position, but my focus remains on the way her pupils dilate, swallowing the green of her irises until she looks as dark and dangerous as the basement of the vault. She is terrified, yes, but beneath the fear is that same stubborn defiance that drew me to her in the first place. She doesn't pull away. She stands her ground in the face of a storm she doesn't understand, her chin tilted just enough to show me the elegant curve of her throat. "We have a lot of work to do on Monday," I murmur, my thumb grazing the soft, sensitive skin of her wrist for a fleeting, unauthorized second. The pulse there is a frantic drumbeat of surrender and rebellion. "Make sure you're ready, Elara. The air in Sterling-Vane is much thinner than you're used to." I finally release her, the absence of her skin leaving a cold, hollow ache in my hand that demands to be filled. I offer a curt, professional nod to the prosecutor, whose name I have already intentionally erased from my memory, and turn back to Arthur. "We should discuss the Zurich accounts, Arthur." In my office. Now, I stalk away without looking back, but the back of my neck prickles with the weight of her gaze. The air in the gala feels stagnant now, the scent of the city and the cheap jazz no longer enough to distract me from the emerald lightning bolt I just invited into my life. Monday morning cannot come fast enough. I want to see her in the harsh fluorescent light of my world. I want to see her trading that emerald silk for a corporate armor that will never be enough to protect her from me. By the time I reach the elevator, my knuckles are white around my glass, and the only thing I can hear over the roar of the city is the memory of her heart beating against my palm. Tonight, the billionaire played his part. But on Monday, the man takes what he wants. Chapter 6. Elara. The lock on the bathroom stall clicked with a deafening, metallic finality, the sound echoing off the cold porcelain and subway-tiled walls. Gravity seemed to double its pull, dragging my head down between my knees as I fought to shallow-breathe air that smelled of industrial bleach and the cloying artificial sweetness of expensive floral diffuser oil. The polished marble floor beneath my heels felt like a sheet of ice, reflecting the overhead fluorescent hum that vibrated inside my skull like a swarm of angry hornets. My phone sat heavy in the pocket of the emerald silk dress, buzzing with a persistent, erratic rhythm that signaled Jax's inevitable descent into chaos. He was currently 1,000 miles away in spirit, but dangerously close in digital form, flooding my screen with memes of dramatic soap opera slaps and wide-eyed cats. "Jax, blink twice if you are being held hostage by a man who looks like he harvests souls for a hobby. Also, can we discuss the scar? It is very villain chic. I am currently researching if CEO of a private equity firm is a known euphemism for Lord of the Underworld." A response was physically impossible. My fingers were blocks of unfeeling wood, frozen by the realization that the ghost from the vault, the man who had dissected my very soul over a glass of bourbon, was currently standing 30 feet away. Silas Vane. The name tasted like copper and ozone in my mouth, a jagged, uncomfortable weight. I had spent 3 years of my life with Julian, a man whose most radical act was ordering a medium roast coffee instead of light, and now the universe had seen fit to throw me into the path of a natural disaster. Freezing water from the gold-plated tap stung my skin as I splashed my face, the droplets clinging to my lashes and blurring the reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked haunted, her eyes wide and bright with a frantic, caffeine-fueled panic, her cheeks flushed a guilty, burning crimson. I straightened the thin straps of the silk dress, the fabric feeling less like a statement of independence and more like a target painted on my back. I took one last, shuddering inhalation of the bleach-scented air and pushed through the heavy mahogany door. The hallway was a tomb of silence, the distant, rhythmic thrum of the jazz band on the rooftop muffled by the thick, velvet-lined walls. I headed for the elevator bank, my footsteps swallowed by the plush charcoal carpeting, desperate to reach the lobby before my knees finally gave way. But the atmospheric pressure in the corridor shifted, growing heavy and stagnant with the sudden scent of expensive bourbon, rain-slicked asphalt, and wood smoke. Silas was leaning against the marble pillar beside the elevators, his arms crossed over a chest that seemed to take up the entire width of the narrow space. He wasn't waiting. He was lurking, a predator positioned at the only watering hole in the desert. He pushed off the stone as I approached, his movement fluid and terrifyingly silent, his presence a wall of tailored wool and cold, unyielding intent. "Are you finished hiding, or should I have a chair brought in for you?" The voice was a low, raspy friction, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards and settled deep in my marrow. He stepped directly into my path, forcing me to stumble back until the cool, hard marble of the wall bit into my shoulder blades. He didn't touch me, but the sheer heat radiating from his body was a physical weight, suffocating every rational thought until there was only the jagged silver line of the scar slicing through his left eyebrow. "I thought you were a ghost from a digital network," I said, my voice thready and betrayal thin, echoing the frantic hammer thud of my heart. I didn't realize ghosts had day jobs as CEOs of billion-dollar firms. Silas leaned in, his face inches from mine, the dim corridor lighting catching the predatory glint in his obsidian eyes. They weren't just dark. They were a void that pulled the air right out of my lungs. "I don't have day jobs, Elara. I have interests. And right now, one of my interests is wondering if Arthur has any idea his stepdaughter spends her nights prowling the basement of the vault, looking for a leash." The threat landed with the force of a physical blow to the solar plexus. I gripped my clutch so hard the sequins bit into my palm, the sharp pinch of pain grounding me for a fleeting second. Does my stepfather know his CEO spends his nights playing God in a dungeon? Does the board of Sterling-Vane know their leader likes to pull the strings of strangers for sport? A ghost of a smirk touched his lips, but his eyes remained ice-cold, unreadable as granite. My private life is a fortress. People only see what I permit them to see. You are the anomaly, little accountant. You walked into a storm you weren't equipped for, and now you're standing in my hallway pretending you aren't terrified of the thunder. "I'm not pretending," I snapped, the fire in my gut finally overriding the cold chill of fear. "I'm an intern. Starting Monday, I am a line item on your payroll. My personal life and your hobbies don't have to overlap." Silas reached out, his hand large and calloused as he braced it against the marble beside my ear. The movement was a blur of lethal grace, trapping me in the small, charged space between his body and the wall. The scent of him, rain and danger, wrapped around me like a shroud. His gaze dropped to my lips before snapping back to mine with an intensity that felt like a touch. "Tell me about the man on your phone," he commanded, the words a low vibration that vibrated against my skin. "Jax. Is he the reason you decided to play with the dark? Is he the one who didn't appreciate the gift of your virginity?" The sheer audacity of the question made me gasp, the sound sharp in the quiet hallway. "He isn't my boyfriend. Jax is gay. He's my best friend. And he's the only person in this city who actually gives a damn about my sanity." The shift in the air was instantaneous. The suspicion that had been radiating off Silas didn't vanish. It transformed into something much more volatile, a possessive, simmering heat that made my vision blur at the edges. His jaw tightened, the bone sharp beneath his skin, and for a second, the corporate billionaire vanished, replaced by the man from the vault who didn't recognize the word no. "Good," he murmured, the word a dark vibration that settled in my chest. "I don't like sharing my focus. And I certainly don't like the idea of another man's shadow over you while you're under my roof." "You don't own me, Silas." I took a step forward, trying to break the heavy tension, but my chest brushed against the solid wall of his waistcoat. The contact electrified me, a sharp spark of heat that radiated down to my toes and left my skin humming. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. He looked down at me like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve by breaking the pieces. Go back to the party, Elara, before Julian comes looking for you with more peppermint-scented platitudes and a safe, boring future. I have a meeting with Arthur, and I suspect you need a few more minutes to convince your heart to stop trying to escape your chest. He stepped back, the sudden absence of his heat leaving me feeling cold, exposed, and strangely bereft. He reached out and pressed the elevator button for me, his thumb grazing the brass with a deliberate, slow movement that felt like a brand. I'll see you Monday morning, 8 sharp. Do not be late. I don't tolerate tardiness, and I definitely don't tolerate lies. If you're going to work in my world, you need to learn that everything has a price. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, mechanical hiss, revealing a mirrored interior that showed me exactly how much of a mess I was. I stepped inside, my legs feeling like they were made of water and ash. As the doors began to close, Silas stood in the corridor, a dark, silent titan framed by the opulent marble, watching me with a look that promised a very long, very difficult summer. The descent was a blur of neon lights through the glass. I reached the lobby and stumbled out into the humid night air, the scent of rain and exhaust finally replacing the suffocating sandalwood of his presence. My pulse refused to slow. I was in trouble. Deep, irreversible trouble, and the work week hadn't even begun. I hailed a cab, the yellow car screeching to a halt at the curb. The interior smelled of stale coffee and old upholstery, a grounding, ugly reality compared to the silver-tongued danger I had just left behind. I stared out the window at the blurred lights of Manhattan, my mind racing through spreadsheets and forensic techniques, trying to find a formula that would make Silas Vane make sense. There wasn't one. He was the variable that broke every equation. By the time I reached my apartment, the silence of the heights felt deafening. I stripped off the emerald dress, the silk falling to the floor in a heap of forgotten intentions. I crawled into bed, the sheets cold against my skin, and closed my eyes. But the darkness offered no relief. All I could see was the jagged silver of a scar and the obsidian depth of a gaze that had already claimed me, whether I was ready to admit it or not. Monday was coming. And with it, the reckoning I had invited into my life the moment I matched with a ghost. Chapter 7. Elara. Monday morning arrived with a brutal, sharp clarity that no amount of caffeine could dampen. The sun hung as a cold, pale disk over the East River, casting long, skeletal shadows across the pavement that felt like bars of a cage. Sterling-Vane Tower loomed over the sidewalk, a monolith of obsidian and glass that seemed to pull the heat right out of the air. It was a structural warning to anyone not aggressive enough to handle the pressure inside. The lobby functioned as a cathedral of silence and polished black marble, smelling faintly of expensive air filtration, floor wax, and the sharp, metallic tang of unadulterated ambition. Every click of my heels against the stone floor echoed with a deafening finality, a countdown to a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. The charcoal blazer of my suit felt like a layer of armor, the wool stiff against my shoulders, but the professional silhouette did nothing to mask the frantic drumming of my heart. As a forensic accountant, I lived by cold numbers and immutable facts. But the facts this morning were treacherous. The man who owned the air in this building was the same man who had tracked my pulse with a single calloused finger in a basement club just 4 nights ago. The elevator ride to the 58th floor was a steady, gravity-defying pull that made my stomach churn. The reflection in the brushed steel of the doors revealed a pale face, eyes bright with caffeine-fueled anxiety, and lips pressed into a thin, determined line. The doors slid open with a soft pneumatic hiss, revealing an office that looked more like a mission control center than a private equity firm. Flat-screen monitors lined every wall, glowing with the jagged green and red lines of global markets, while analysts in crisp white shirts moved through the space with the synchronized, lethal precision of a predatory pack. Amara, the receptionist, sat behind a desk carved from a single block of white quartz. She looked up with a smile that failed to reach her eyes, a look common in a building where everyone hunted for a weakness to exploit. The name Elara Vance was already on her screen. "Arthur told us to expect brilliance," she said, her voice smooth and devoid of any real warmth. The mention of my stepfather sent a fresh wave of unease through me. Arthur Vance was a senior director here, but in this building, he was just another cog in the vast dark machine Silas Vane controlled. I took the guest badge she offered, the plastic cool and heavy in my palm, and headed for the forensic accounting wing. It was a glass-walled enclosure that offered a panoramic view of the city, but felt more like an observation tank. I was barely 10 minutes into setting up my workstation, the scent of the new leather desk chair still sharp, when a shadow fell across my keyboard. Julian stood there, looking far too comfortable for 8 in the morning. He wore a navy suit tailored to perfection, his hair swept back in a way that screamed old money and safe, predictable choices. He held 2 steaming cups of coffee, the scent of dark roast and peppermint-scented soap hitting me like a distraction. "Lifeline," he said, setting one of the cups down on my desk. "This place is a shark tank, Elara. I spent half my morning in the legal department, and the energy here is suffocating." His voice was a smooth, practiced baritone that usually acted as a balm, but today it felt like static. I didn't want his coffee, and I certainly didn't want the protection he was so eager to offer. I wanted to disappear into a spreadsheet and forget that the CEO of this company knew exactly what I looked like in emerald silk. "Thank you, Julian," I murmured, keeping my focus on the monitor where the login screen blinked like a mocking eye. "I'm sure I'll manage." He leaned against the edge of my workstation, a gesture of familiarity that made my skin prickle with irritation. The wool of his suit brushed against my arm, static, free, and bland. "Don't be so stubborn. If the senior partners give you a hard time, call me. I'm working closely with the federal probe team this summer. Even a man like Silas Vane has to play nice with the prosecutor's office." The name Silas hit the room like a physical weight, dropping the temperature by 10 degrees. I turned toward the large ceiling-mounted security globe. The dark, mirrored surface stared back at me like a glass eye, unblinking and all-seeing. A gaze seemed to burn through it, a heavy, obsidian pressure that had nothing to do with the man standing in front of me, and everything to do with the man sitting on the top floor. "We should get to the morning briefing," Julian said, gesturing toward the elevator bank. "It's on the 10th floor today. The whole firm attends." The walk to the elevators was a blur of high-frequency trades and hushed, frantic conversations. The car was crowded when it arrived, filled with the scent of expensive laundry detergent, high-stakes stress, and the faint ozone smell of the machinery. Julian put a hand on my arm to guide me inside, a protective move that felt entirely unnecessary and patronizing. The elevator doors began to slide shut, but a large, calloused hand blocked the sensor. The doors bounced back with a mechanical groan, and the air in the small space suddenly turned to lead. Silas Vane stepped inside. He had discarded his jacket, his white dress shirt rolled up to reveal muscular forearms covered in intricate, dark ink that disappeared beneath his cuffs. The tattoos looked like a story written in shadows. He looked like a man who had spent his morning tearing apart a boardroom with his bare hands. The jagged scar at his brow was a stark silver line in the harsh lead lighting of the car. He didn't look at Julian. He didn't look at the other analysts who were suddenly holding their breath. His eyes locked onto mine, a cold, predatory focus that stripped away my professional facade. He stood with a terrifying stillness, his presence crowding the elevator until I felt forced to take a step back, my spine hitting the mirrored wall. Julian's hand tightened on my arm, a silent claim that was as obvious as it was useless. Silas didn't speak, but the air around him was electrified, vibrating with a simmering, possessive heat that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Every breath I took was filled with the scent of him, bourbon, rain, and something dangerous that made my vision blur at the edges. The silence in the elevator was a suffocating pressure, a warning that the rules of the corporate world didn't apply when he was in the room. The 10th floor arrived with a sluggishness that felt like an eternity. The doors hissed open, and the crowd surged out, desperate to escape the tension radiating from the man in the center. I tried to follow, but Silas shifted his weight. His broad shoulder subtly blocked my path for a fraction of a second, a deliberate, silent command to stay back. Julian looked back, his brow furrowed in confusion as he stepped onto the carpeted landing. "Elara?" "I'll be right there," I said, my voice sounding foreign and thready to my own ears. Silas watched Julian disappear into the hallway before turning his full attention back to me. The elevator doors began to close, trapping us in a private metal box that suddenly felt much too small for the both of us. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, the heat radiating from his body an overwhelming surge that made my knees tremble. "The prosecutor doesn't know how to mark his territory, Elara." He murmured the words against the shell of my ear, his voice a low, raspy friction that vibrated through my chest. "If he did, he would know that putting his hand on you in my building is an invitation for me to break his fingers. You don't own this building," I breathed, the defiance in my gut finally waking up to combat the sheer magnetism of his presence. "And you certainly don't own me." A ghost of a smirk touched his lips, but his eyes remained obsidian, unreadable and terrifyingly focused. "I own everything I permit to exist within these walls. And right now, I am permitting you to go to that meeting and pretend you aren't thinking about the way my skin felt against yours on Friday night." He reached out, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw with a deliberate, slow movement that sent a sharp spark of heat down to my toes. The touch was a brand, a claim he was making in the dark before sending me back into the light. "Don't be late for the mentorship briefing at 10, little accountant. I don't like to be kept waiting, and I don't like to repeat my orders." He pressed the button for the lobby, the elevator doors sliding open to reveal the obsidian and glass cavern below. He stepped out without another word, his stride fluid and predatory, leaving me alone in the car. My heart was hitting my ribs like a trapped bird, and the scent of sandalwood and danger still clung to my skin, heavier than any perfume. I stood there for a moment, my palms flat against the mirrored wall, grounding myself as the reality of the situation crashed down. Monday morning was just beginning, and I was already fighting for every scrap of air. I had come to New York to find a fresh start, but I had walked straight into a labyrinth owned by a man who didn't understand the concept of surrender. The morning briefing was a blur of corporate jargon and strategic goals. I sat in the back, my notebook open, but my pen stayed still. Every time the door opened, my neck prickled, expecting the Titan to walk in and finish what he had started in the elevator. Julian sat beside me, his presence a safe, dull contrast to the fire Silas had lit in my blood. I looked at my hands, still shaking slightly under the table. I was Elara Vance, forensic accountant. I could solve any mystery, find any hidden number, and balance any ledger. But as I looked at the ceiling where another security globe watched the room, I realized there was no formula for Silas Vane. He was the anomaly that broke every equation, and I was the one tasked with finding the truth he had spent a lifetime burying. The meeting adjourned, and the room erupted into the sounds of shuffling feet and chatter. I stayed in my seat for a second longer than necessary, staring at the empty podium. The weight of the diamond choker I had chosen to wear today, hidden beneath the high collar of my blouse, felt heavier than ever. It was a secret, a tether to a man I shouldn't want, and a reminder that in his world, I was already marked. Julian touched my shoulder. Ready for lunch? I looked up at him, seeing the safe future my mother wanted for me. I saw the light roast coffee and the light roast life. Then I looked at the elevator bank where Silas had vanished. I'm busy, Julian. I have a lot of numbers to crunch. I walked away before he could offer another lifeline, heading back to the 58th floor. The air in Sterling-Vane was thin, but I was going to learn how to breathe it. Or I was going to let it suffocate me. Either way, the rules had officially changed. Chapter 8. Silas. The high-resolution monitor on my mahogany desk is a window into a world of controlled chaos, but my focus has narrowed to a single, high-definition frame. The forensic accounting floor exists as a grid of glass and white light, a hive for data-hungry drones, yet Elara sits in the center of the frantic movement like a glitch in a perfect system. She wore a high-collared navy blouse today, a stiff, professional shield intended to erase the memory of the emerald silk that has been suffocating my sleep since Friday night. She doesn't realize that the way she bites her lower lip while dissecting a spreadsheet is more provocative than anything she could have stripped off in the vault. I lean back in my leather chair, the scent of expensive hide and cold espresso grounding me as I monitor the feed. Behind me, the New York skyline is a jagged teeth line of glass and steel biting into a bruised sky, but the power in this room isn't coming from the view. It's coming from the silent, digital observation of the woman 10 floors below. Beside Elara's workstation, the ghost of Julian, the peppermint-scented irritant from the prosecutor's office, materializes again. He leans over her desk, his proximity a physical violation of the space I've already claimed in my mind. He points at her screen, his hand lingering inches from her shoulder, and my jaw locks until the bone clicks with a sharp, discordant pop. A federal probe is currently breathing down my neck. 3 different agencies are hunting for the blood hidden in my ledgers, and a family legacy demands constant, violent maintenance in the Docklands. I should be reviewing the Zurich acquisition. I should be silencing the leak in the shipping terminal. Instead, I am seconds away from picking up the phone and having a high-ranking government official barred from my building for the crime of breathing her air. I press the intercom button, my finger steady despite the white-hot static vibrating through my blood. Laura, send the intern up. Floor 60. Now. I don't wait for a response. I cut the feed, the screen going black and reflecting my own face, a mask of jagged lines and obsidian intent. 5 minutes later, the heavy mahogany doors of my office groan on their hinges. Elara steps inside, her footsteps swallowed by the plush charcoal carpet, but the frantic rhythm of her heart precedes her into the room. She looks small in this cavern of dark wood and chrome, yet she carries herself with a stubborn grace that refuses to be intimidated by the shadows. I stand, the movement slow and predatory, a titan rising to greet a guest he has no intention of letting leave. I walk to the doors and turn the heavy brass lock. The metallic thud echoes through the silent room like a period at the end of a long sentence. Is there a problem with my preliminary audit, Mr. Vane? Her voice is a soft friction, a sound that vibrates against the walls of my chest. She stands by the guest chairs, her knuckles white as she grips her tablet. She refuses to look at the bed-sized desk or the floor-to-ceiling windows. She is focusing on the air between us, as if she can negotiate with the tension. There is a problem with your focus, I say, my voice a low, raspy velvet that settles in the room like smoke. I monitored the prosecutor hovering over your shoulder for 10 minutes. This firm deals in secrets that can bury men for 3 lifetimes. If you are distracted by safe choices in light roast coffee, you are a liability I cannot afford to have on the floor. Elara's chin tilts upward, the fire in her green eyes flaring to life. Julian is a friend. And technically, he's part of the team investigating your accounts. If anything, my proximity to him is an asset for your survival. I cross the distance between us in 3 long, silent strides, stopping only when I am close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. She smells of vanilla, rain, and that specific electric scent of mounting panic. I am handled deep in a war with the Department of Justice, and you think I need an intern to play double agent with a man who doesn't know how to mark his territory? I lean in, my face inches from hers, the air between us thick and tasting of ozone. The jagged scar at my brow pulses with a phantom heat. I am handling your mentorship personally, Elara. Effective immediately. You will report to this office every morning at 8. You will work from the station in the corner. You will not discuss your findings with Arthur, and you will certainly not discuss them with the peppermint-scented irritant. She takes a sharp step back, her spine hitting the cold glass of the window. That's a conflict of interest. I'm a forensic accountant. I'm here to find the truth in the numbers, not be your personal project. The truth is whatever I permit it to be in this building, I murmur, my voice dropping to a vibration that settles in the marrow of her bones. And right now, the truth is that this attraction is a fire I cannot put out. It's a variable I didn't account for, and it's making me reckless enough to burn the whole world down just to see you in the light. I reach out, my palm flat against the glass beside her head, trapping her. The sun behind her casts her silhouette in gold, but her eyes are twin emeralds of pure defiance. I am giving you a choice, Elara. One chance to save yourself. You can walk out of that door right now. I will have you transferred to the London office before the sun sets. You will be safe there. You will be far away from my shadows and the things I have to do to keep this empire upright. She doesn't breathe. Her gaze searches mine, looking for the lie, but she finds only the cold, hard reality of a man who has forgotten how to ask for permission. The silence in the office is a suffocating weight, a stagnant pressure that makes the ticking of the grandfather clock sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. And if I stay, if you stay, you are mine, professionally, personally. I will own your time, your mind, and eventually, the very air in your lungs. I will push you until you break, and then I will put you back together in my image. You won't be looking for Julian's approval anymore. You'll be looking for mine. I watch the pulse in her neck, a frantic, rhythmic drumbeat of surrender. She is terrified, but she isn't moving toward the door. She is a moth, staring at a blowtorch, and she is choosing the flame over the safety of the dark. I'm staying, she whispers, the words a jagged edge against the quiet. I didn't come to New York to run away from a man just because he's difficult. A dark, triumphant heat surges through my gut, unmooring my last shred of restraint. I lean in until my lips graze the shell of her ear, my breath hot against her skin. Good. Then, meet me at the Glass House at 8. A private room. No cameras. No jacks. No masks. We will discuss the Zurich ledgers, and then we will discuss exactly what you want from me. I want to know why you are so untouched, Elara. I want to know how a girl like you survived a world this corrupt, without a single scratch on her soul. Or perhaps I just want to be the one who finally leaves a mark that doesn't fade. I pull back, my thumb grazing the line of her jaw with a deliberate, slow movement that feels like a brand. I walk to the door and turn the lock, the mechanism clicking open with a sound of liberation that feels like an invitation. Go back to work, little accountant. And Elara? She stops in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the stark, sterile light of the hallway. Don't wear the navy blouse tonight. I want to see you in the emerald. I watch her walk away, her stride more confident than it was when she entered. She thinks she is making a career move. She thinks she is investigating a firm for the feds. She has no idea she has just walked into a gilded cage and handed me the key with a smile. The federal probe can wait. The Docklands can wait. Tonight, the only ledger that matters is the one I am going to write on her skin. Chapter 9. Elara. The glass house sat like a transparent jewel at the edge of the meatpacking district, a skeletal structure of steel and reinforced crystal that resembled an industrial cathedral more than a restaurant. Rain-slicked cobblestones outside reflected the hungry, jagged neon of Manhattan, but inside, the air remained filtered and cool, carrying the cloying scent of white orchids and unadulterated power. Standing in the foyer, the emerald silk Jax had rescued from my past slithered against my skin like a second, more dangerous layer of nerves. Every time the heavy glass doors hissed open, a gust of humid city air chased the floral scent away, replaced briefly by the sharp, wet smell of asphalt and diesel exhaust. A hostess with a face carved from porcelain and eyes that appeared to calculate my net worth led me past the main dining room. We moved through a maze of frosted glass panels and shadowed alcoves until we reached a heavy mahogany door at the very rear of the building. She didn't announce my arrival. She simply tapped a keypad, the lock disengaging with a soft, mechanical click, and gestured for me to enter a space that didn't appear on any public floor plan. The private room existed as a tomb of glass and dark stone. One entire wall functioned as a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Hudson, the black water churning below like liquid ink under a bruised sky. A circular table of polished obsidian sat in the center, set for two with heavy silver and crystal that shimmered under a singular, low-hanging pendant light. Silas was already there. He had discarded his tie and unbuttoned the first two buttons of his charcoal dress shirt, revealing the jagged, dark ink crawling up the side of his neck into his jawline. He stood by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, his silhouette massive and imposing against the sprawling city lights. He didn't turn as the door clicked shut, but the atmospheric pressure in the room shifted instantly, growing stagnant and heavy with the scent of bourbon and that sharp, ozone-tinged danger that always preceded his presence. The emerald was the right choice. His voice was a low, raspy vibration that seemed to travel through the slate floor and up into the soles of my feet. He turned then, his movements fluid and predatory. The low light caught the silver line of the scar through his brow, making him look less like a CEO and more like a man who had clawed his way out of a very shallow grave. The click of my heels on the stone floor sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. I am here for the Zurich ledgers, Silas, not a fashion critique. A ghost of a smirk touched his lips, but his eyes remained obsidian, unreadable, and cold as a winter sea. Sit down, Elara. We have all night for the ledgers. But first, we are going to settle the debt of your curiosity. The chair he gestured to was velvet, cool and soft against my bare back as I took my seat. He didn't sit across from me. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, brushed steel watch, placing it on the obsidian table between us. The ticking of the second hand functioned as a rhythmic, metallic hammer against the silence. 10 minutes, he murmured, leaning in until the heat radiating from his body suffocated every rational thought in my head. I don't deal in small talk or peppermint-scented lies. I deal in truth. It is the only currency I accept in this room. You get 10 minutes to ask me anything, and in return, I get the same. The sheer audacity of the move made my pulse skip a jagged beat. Why the clock? Because time is the only thing men like me can't steal, buy, or manipulate. It makes the answers more honest when the seconds are bleeding out. The edge of the table was cold and unforgiving beneath my palms as I gripped the stone. I could have asked about the shell companies, the federal probe, or the rumors of the family bloodline that allegedly funded Sterling-Vane's first acquisitions. But looking at the man in front of me, those things felt like distant static. "Why did you leave the vault on Thursday?" His jaw locked, the muscle twitching once before he took a slow, deliberate sip of his bourbon. "I don't hunt prey that doesn't know it's in the woods, Elara. You walked into that club looking for a rebellion, but you had no idea that you were a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse." "I am many things, but I am not a man who breaks things just because they are fragile and convenient. I wanted you to walk away. I wanted you to stay in your safe, light roast world, and yet you made me your personal project today," I challenged, the fire in my gut finally overriding the tremor in my voice. He leaned closer, his breath hot against my cheek, smelling of wood smoke and expensive grain. "Because you didn't walk away, you stayed. You looked into the dark and you didn't blink. That makes you a complication I can't ignore, and a temptation I've stopped trying to resist." The watch ticked, 9 minutes remaining. "My turn," he rasped, the sound a dark vibration against my skin. "Why were you with a man like Julian for 3 years? A man who is essentially a human beige wall with no depth." The question hit like a physical blow to the chest. Because he was safe. Because my life has been a series of spreadsheets and predictable outcomes. Julian was the result of a formula my mother wrote for me. He was the endgame of the good daughter act I've been perfecting since I was 16. Silas scoffed, the sound a sharp friction. Safety is a lie for people who are afraid to breathe. You spent 3 years suffocating because you were afraid of the weight of your own pulse. And now you're sitting across from a man who could ruin your life with a signature, and you've never looked more alive. The heat in my face wasn't guilt anymore, it was an awakening. 8 minutes. What drives you? I asked, my voice growing steadier as I leaned into the tension. You have more money than the GDP of most small nations. You have the city under your thumb. What is left to want? Control, he answered without a second of hesitation, his gaze dropping to my lips before snapping back to my eyes. The world is built on chaos and the whims of weak men. I am the one who decides who lives and dies in this market. I am the one who writes the rules so the animals don't tear each other apart. I want to be the architect of the reality everyone else is forced to live in. It sounds lonely, I whispered. It is absolute, he countered, his tone flat and unyielding. 6 minutes. The watch seemed to grow louder, filling the room with the sound of disappearing time. Why me? I asked. There are 1,000 forensic accountants in this city, 1,000 women who wouldn't be a liability to your reputation or your secrets. Why are you watching me on a high-res feed instead of running your empire? He stood up, the movement slow and terrifyingly graceful. He walked around the table, his presence crowding me until I had to tilt her head back just to keep him in focus. He reached out, his hand large and calloused as it traced the line of my jaw. The contact electrified me, a sharp spark of heat that radiated down to my toes and left my skin humming. Because you are the only variable I can't account for, he murmured against the shell of my ear, his voice a low vibration that settled in the marrow of my bones. You are untouched. In a city where everyone has a price and every soul has a stain, you are a clean ledger. It makes me want to find the ink that finally leaves a mark that doesn't wash off, and because you smell like vanilla and rain, and it is the only thing that makes me lose my focus. The power dynamic shifted so violently I felt lightheaded. The watch chimed. 0. The 10 minutes had evaporated into the stagnant air. Dinner arrived in a blur of silent, efficient service. Oysters on ice that smelled of the deep, cold Atlantic. Wagyu beef so tender it felt like a sin, and wine that tasted of velvet and old earth. We discussed the Zurich ledgers through the meal, his mind a razor-sharp instrument that dissected every numerical discrepancy I pointed out. He wasn't just a boss. He was a master of the craft. He understood the blood beneath the ink better than I ever could. As the plates were being cleared, the heavy mahogany door opened without a knock. A man in a dark suit, one of Silas's personal security detail, stepped inside, leaning down to whisper into Silas's ear. The change in Silas was instantaneous. The predatory calm vanished, replaced by an icy, lethal focus. He didn't look at the guard. He checked a notification on his encrypted phone, his jaw locking tight until the bone clicked. "The clock just accelerated," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low growl as he reached for his charcoal jacket draped over the back of the chair. He didn't offer an apology. He offered a briefing. "The Department of Justice isn't just knocking anymore, Elara. They're preparing to kick the door in. My sources within the district attorney's office, Julian's backyard, confirm a domestic raid is being authorized. They're looking for a puncture wound in the firm's logistics wing." I stood up, the emerald silk rustling against my thighs, the coldness of the room finally seeping through the fabric. "Is that why you're leaving?" "I'm leaving because the rot in Zurich is the tether they're planning to pull. If they secure the European accounts, the domestic firm falls in 48 hours. I have to be on the ground in Switzerland to scrub the trail, insulate our international holdings, and silence the leak before the feds can trigger their mutual legal assistance treaties." He stepped into my space, his heat a physical weight that grounded me against the sudden chill of the news. "I'll be in Switzerland for at least 10 days. It's a surgical extraction of data. If I fail, Sterling-Vane ceases to exist by the time I land back at Teterboro. The family legacy depends on this scrub. The 10 days weren't a choice. They were a tactical necessity for survival." "Stay in the building, Elara," he commanded, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw with a deliberate, slow movement that felt like a brand. "Do your work. Do not talk to Julian. He's going to use my absence to circle you like a vulture, looking for a way into my systems through you. Don't give him a single scrap of information. I'm leaving you my private security frequency. If anyone so much as breathes on you the wrong way, you use it." He escorted me to the curb where the black sedan was already idling, its engine a low, rhythmic thrum against the downpour. The rain hit us like a physical weight, soaking into my hair and the thin silk of the dress. He didn't kiss me. He simply held the door open, his silhouette framed by the neon lights of the city. "Go," he commanded, the word a dark vibration that filled the cabin of the car as I slid inside. As the car pulled away, I looked back through the rain-streaked glass. Silas was already walking toward a waiting SUV, his phone to his ear, disappearing into the dark world he was rushing to save. I was alone in New York, and for the first time, I realized that the 10 days ahead wouldn't just be an absence. They would be a siege. Chapter 10. Elara. 10 days is a lifetime in a city that never stops moving. For 10 days, the 58th floor of Sterling-Vane has functioned as a glass-walled purgatory, a clinical cage of white light, humming servers, and whispered judgment. I arrive at 8 sharp every morning, the charcoal blazer of my suit a stiff, professional shroud that feels more like a burial wrap with each passing hour. The routine is a rhythmic, hollow drumbeat, the lobby marble cool beneath my heels, the silent elevator climb, the scent of expensive air filtration and unadulterated stress. The silence of the office is more exhausting than the work. It isn't a peaceful quiet. It is the pressurized stillness of a room where the oxygen is slowly being bled out. With Silas in Zurich, the firm hasn't just slowed down, it has gone into a defensive, predatory crouch. The usual frantic energy of high-frequency trades has been replaced by the low, anxious hum of people waiting for a gavel to fall. The preliminary surveillance Silas warned me about in the glasshouse is no longer a theory. It is a tangible, suffocating weight. Every morning, I see the black SUVs parked at the curb, their engines idling in a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrates through the sidewalk and up into the soles of my shoes. The men inside don't bother to hide their long-lens cameras anymore. They sit with the windows cracked just enough for the glass to catch the sun, mapping the nervous system of this building. They are waiting for a single tremor in the Vane infrastructure, a heartbeat of weakness they can exploit. Inside the tower, the atmosphere has shifted with the brutal efficiency of a market crash. Analysts who once offered polite, cautious nods now look through me as if I am part of the office hardware. I am a liability, the intern who caught the CEO's eye just as the Department of Justice began circling the wagons. They smell the smoke of the impending raid. They see the federal shadow falling over the lobby, and they don't want to be standing near me when the fire starts. Every time I walk to the break room, the conversations die. The clinking of silver spoons against ceramic mugs is the only sound, sharp and accusatory in the sudden vacuum. The family directors, men like Arthur who usually carry themselves with an air of untouchable arrogance, now move through the halls with a frantic, hunted energy. Their eyes are bloodshot, their ties loosened, their voices hushed as they huddle in glass-walled offices that no longer feel private. They look at me with a mixture of suspicion and resentment, as if my presence is a lightning rod for the storm currently gathering over their heads. I spend my nights in the heights, standing on the balcony until the wind off the river turns my skin to ice. I stare at the Manhattan skyline, a motherboard of neon and shadow, and nurse a bitter, cold anger that tastes of copper and salt. I tell myself I don't care that Silas hasn't called. I tell myself that a man who disappears to scrub a continent is exactly the kind of man I should be running from, but the silence from Zurich is a taunt, a reminder that I am just a variable he left behind to hold a line I don't fully understand. He's not coming back to save you, Elara. He's too busy burning the evidence. The voice is a dull, flat note that shatters the rhythm of my thoughts. Julian stands by the coffee station, the scent of peppermint-scented soap and expensive laundry detergent hitting me like a distraction. He has been circling me all week, a safe harbor in a storm he thinks has already passed. He looks smug, his posture radiating the confidence of a man whose father is currently signing the death warrants for the firm's logistics wing. The surveillance detail outside isn't for show, Elara. Julian leans in, his proximity a physical violation of the space I've been trying to keep clear. The DOJ has been tracing the logistics loops for 72 hours. We know the Zurich accounts are being purged. We know Silas is trying to bury the trail before the mutual legal assistance treaties are triggered. But the domestic pulse is already peaking. When the doors come down, you don't want to be the one holding the keys to his ghost loops. I take a long, slow breath of the ozone-heavy air, my fingers tightening around my paper cup until the cardboard buckles. I'm a forensic accountant, Julian. I'm always on the side of the numbers. And right now, the numbers say you're trespassing on private property. He offers that practiced, patronizing smile, the look of a man who still thinks he can negotiate with a hurricane. I'm offering you a lifeline, real immunity. My father wants the Vane legacy dismantled, but he doesn't care about the intern. Come to dinner tonight. Let's talk about how to get you out of this building before the tactical teams arrive. Before the name Vane becomes a lead weight around your neck. I'm busy, Julian. I have an audit to finish. I walk away, but the back of my neck prickles. The family directors are watching me from their glass offices, their eyes calculating whether I am a shield or a sacrifice. The federal agents outside are watching me through their tinted glass, their cameras capturing every time I check the time. And somewhere across the Atlantic, I know Silas is watching the same data streams I am. The 10 days are almost up. The pressure in the building is reaching a breaking point. the air humming with the static charge of the impending storm. The preliminary surveillance is just the heartbeat before the scream. Every chime of the elevator bank sounds like a hammer cocking. Every flickering light on my monitor feels like a digital ghost trying to break through. I spend the afternoon submerged in the logistics manifests, my eyes burning from the blue light of the screen. I see the patterns now, the way the shipping routes in Brooklyn mirror the shell companies in Switzerland. It's a beautiful, terrifying architecture of corruption, a web of ink and blood that stretches across the ocean, and Silas is at the center of it, holding the structure together with sheer force of will while the world tries to tear it down. I'm not waiting for a ghost anymore. I'm waiting for the reckoning. And as I look at the security globe in the ceiling, I realize I'd rather drown in Silas's shadows than survive in Julian's light. The pulse is rising, and by the time Silas lands back at Teterboro, the city won't be the same. The siege has begun, and I am the only one left in the vault, guarding a treasure that might just be my own undoing. Chapter 11. Elara. The first sensation was the silence. It wasn't the hollow, thin quiet of my apartment in the Heights, but a heavy, pressurized stillness that felt like being submerged in deep, dark water. My eyelids were weights of lead, sticking together with the dried salt of sleep, and the residue of a night that had spiraled out of my control. When they finally parted, the world was a blur of charcoal shadows and the soft, rhythmic hum of a high-end climate control system moving air that tasted of expensive leather and filtered ozone. The ceiling above wasn't the white plaster I knew. It was a vast expanse of dark, polished concrete, interrupted by recessed channels of dim amber light that cast long, distorted shadows across the room. I shifted, and the sheets beneath me whispered, a cool, high-thread count silk that felt like water against my bare skin. Bare skin. The realization hit like a physical jolt, a spike of adrenaline cutting through the thick, cotton-wool fog of a hangover. I bolted upright, the sudden movement sending a jagged shard of pain through my temples. The emerald silk dress was gone. In its place, I was swallowed by a massive, crisp white dress shirt that smelled unmistakably of sandalwood, rain, and the sharp, metallic tang of Silas Vane. The cuffs hung past my fingertips, and the hem pooled around my thighs, a stark, pale contrast against the dark charcoal duvet. Memory hit in fragmented strobe light bursts. The gilded cage, the cloying artificial sweetness of too many gin fizzes. Julian's hand, clammy and insistent, pressing against the small of my back as he whispered about safety. And then, the atmospheric shift, the way the air in the club had suddenly turned to ice. Silas had appeared like a vengeful god, his eyes obsidian and lethal, his voice a low growl that had silenced the thumping bass of the room. I remembered the sensation of being lifted, the world tilting as the floor fell away, and the solid, unyielding heat of his chest against my cheek. This room was a fortress. Floor-to-ceiling glass formed the far wall, revealing a Manhattan skyline that looked like a motherboard of neon and shadow. There were no trinkets here, no personal photographs, no softness. The furniture was all sharp angles and heavy textures, leather, slate, and dark wood. It was a space designed for a man who didn't want to be known, a man who viewed vulnerability as a fatal flaw. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the polished wood floor freezing against my soles. My head throbbed with every heartbeat, a dull, rhythmic hammer hitting the base of my skull. I followed a faint light toward the open door, my footsteps silent on the heavy, plush rug. The living area was even more expansive, a cavern of minimalist luxury. Silas sat at a massive slab of black granite that functioned as a kitchen island, a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. He hadn't changed. He was still wearing the charcoal trousers from the night before, his white shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest. The sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate, dark ink of the tattoos on his forearms. The ink looked like a story written in shadows, twisting and turning like the secrets he kept. He didn't look up, but his posture shifted. A subtle tightening of his shoulders that told me he'd been tracking my approach since the moment I moved. The glass of water on the counter has 2 aspirin beside it. Drink them before you start asking questions you aren't ready to hear the answers to. His voice was a low, raspy friction that seemed to scrape against the silence. I walked toward the island, the oversized shirt fluttering around my legs and making me feel painfully exposed despite the volume of the fabric. The water was cold, the condensation slick against my palm. I swallowed the pills, the metallic tang of the aspirin hitting the back of my throat and grounding me in the reality of the morning. "Where is my dress?" I asked, my voice sounding foreign, a breathless morning dry rasp. "In the trash. You spilled enough gin on it to make it flammable, and I don't permit reminders of that prosecutor's touch in my home." I gripped the edge of the granite, the stone unforgiving and cold beneath my fingers. "You took my clothes off, Silas." He finally looked at me. His eyes were bottomless, the jagged silver scar at his brow catching the early morning light. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look apologetic. He looked like a man who had simply done what was necessary to claim a territory. "You were barely conscious and shivering. I put you in something clean. If you're looking for an apology for seeing what I've already spent half my life imagining, you're in the wrong zip code, Elara." The heat in my face wasn't just the hangover anymore. It was a slow, burning fuse of indignation and something much more dangerous, an attraction that felt like walking toward a cliff edge in a fog. "Why am I here? You have a penthouse. You have a dozen cars. You could have sent me home. And let you wake up in an empty apartment with a head full of bad decisions and a prosecutor who thinks he has a claim on you?" He set the tablet down with a sharp, final clack. "I told you before I left for Zurich. You are a variable I am handling personally. That means I don't leave you to be picked over by scavengers when you decide to drown your anxieties in cheap liquor. I didn't drown my anxieties. I was having a drink at a company event. You were drowning," he countered, standing up. He was a mountain of tailored wool and cold intent, his presence crowding the kitchen until the air felt thin and electrified. "You were a lamb in a room full of wolves, and the only reason you aren't a headline this morning is because I decided to walk back into the cage and remind them who the predator is." I took a step back, but my heels hit the base of the cabinets. Silas didn't stop. He moved into my space, his heat radiating through the thin fabric of the shirt I was wearing, his shirt. He reached out, his hand large and calloused as he braced it against the granite on either side of my hips, trapping me between his body and the stone. "Do you have any idea how close you came to breaking the one rule I gave you? I told you no masks, no games. And yet, the moment my back is turned, you're playing the part of the accessible intern for a man who wants to use you as leverage against me. Julian doesn't want to use me. Julian wants to bury me." He murmured the words against the shell of my ear, his breath hot and smelling of dark roast coffee and wood smoke, and he thinks the way to do it is through the girl who can read my ledgers. He doesn't want your heart, Elara. He wants my downfall. And you were handing him the shovel. The weight of his words settled in my gut like lead. I looked up at him, the obsidian depth of his eyes swallowing the room. "Is that all I am to you? A ledger? A security risk that needs to be managed?" Silas leaned in, his lips inches from mine. The tension was a living thing, a cord stretched to the point of snapping. "If you were just a risk, I would have sent you to London. If you were just a ledger, I wouldn't be standing here wondering how the hell I'm going to let you walk out of this door today." He reached up, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw with a deliberate, slow movement that sent a sharp spark of electricity down my spine. The white shirt felt like a brand against my skin. "You're a clean ledger, Elara, but I'm starting to think I'd rather be the ink that ruins you than the man who lets you stay pristine for someone else." I should have pushed him away. I should have demanded my phone and a cab. But as his hand slid into the hair at the nape of my neck, his grip firm and possessive, my body betrayed me. I leaned into the solid warmth of him, the scent of sandalwood filling my senses until there was nothing else in the world. "Go to the guest bath," he rasped, his eyes dropping to my mouth before snapping back to mine. "There is a new suit waiting for you. The car will be ready in 30 minutes to take you to the office." I didn't move. Silas's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath his skin as he fought for his own restraint. "Now, Elara, before I forget that we have a board meeting at 10 and a federal probe to dismantle," I turned and fled toward the hallway, the silk shirt billowing behind me like a white flag of surrender. My heart was hitting my ribs like a trapped bird, and the air in the penthouse felt like it was humming with a frequency only he and I could hear. I was officially a part of his world now, and as I looked at the black and silver suit waiting on the marble counter of the bathroom, a suit that fit my measurements perfectly, I realized I wasn't just auditing his books anymore. I was auditing my own soul. And the numbers were finally starting to add up to something terrifying. Chapter 12. Silas. The high-security server room is a subterranean vault of humming steel and rhythmic, blue lead light, a place where the temperature remains locked at a constant, clinical chill to protect the hardware from the friction of a billion processed data points. The scent of ozone and chilled, recycled air is sharp enough to burn the nostrils, cutting through the heavy, toxic fatigue of the most grueling week of my professional life. I lean against the edge of a vibrating server rack, my shoulder blades pressing into the cold metal as I watch Elara. 4 days have passed since she woke up in my bed wearing my shirt. 4 days of intentional, agonizing distance. After that Monday morning in the penthouse, I had exiled her back to the 58th floor, surrounding her with a fortress of non-disclosure agreements and a mountain of digital clutter to keep her occupied. I watched her on the security feeds, a silent, obsidian ghost in a glass box. I saw the way she avoided the elevators I used, the way she stiffened whenever my name was mentioned in a briefing, and the way she buried herself in the ledgers until the cleaning crews were the only souls left in the building. The distance wasn't just a strategy. It was a cage I built for both of us. I needed to see if the firm could breathe without her presence in my office, and I needed to see if my own pulse would normalize. It didn't. The federal probe into the Brooklyn shipping manifests has intensified, and the family council is demanding a resolution to the European leak. My world is a pressure cooker, and Elara is the only variable that makes the numbers make sense. I summoned her here at midnight. We have been in this cold, metallic cage for 5 hours. The silence between us a living thing that grows heavier with every passing second. She hasn't looked at me once since she entered, her focus pinned to the glowing terminal with a stubborn, silent fury. She is a surgeon with numbers, and tonight, the operating theater is mine. The forensic files I loaded onto her station are a labyrinth of shell companies, offshore transfers, and mirrored ledgers, a mess designed by a professional to hide the slow, steady bleed of internal embezzlement. I watched 3 of my senior directors fail to find the puncture wound. Elara found the first discrepancy in 20 minutes. Now she is tracking the digital breadcrumbs through a thicket of encrypted accounts, her face illuminated by the pale, flickering blue glow of the monitor. The silence of the room is heavy, broken only by the mechanical whir of the cooling fans and the staccato, aggressive click of the keys. We are fueled by nothing but bitter black coffee and a tension that has been vibrating the walls since Monday. I watch the way her jaw sets, the way her eyes track the hexadecimal strings with a speed that shouldn't be humanly possible. "You're missing the obvious," I murmur, stepping into her space until the heat radiating through her thin silk blouse is a physical force against my chest. The scent of her, vanilla and rain, is a localized storm in this sterile, metallic box. Look at the timestamp on the Gibraltar transfer. It's offset by exactly 6 seconds. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't even pull away from the proximity. She simply tilts her head back, her neck a long, pale curve in the dim light, her eyes reflecting the scrolling data with a frightening clarity. It's not an offset, Silas. It's a ghost loop. They aren't hiding the money by moving it. They're duplicating the transaction in a parallel ledger that only triggers during server maintenance windows. If you had spent less time looking at your own maintenance logs, you would have seen it 3 days ago. "Let's play a game," I say, my voice dropping to a low, raspy friction. I reach around her, my arms framing her body as I tap a series of commands into the secondary terminal. A logic game on the mainframe. If you can bypass my final encryption before the first ray of sun hits the glass on the top floor, the prize is yours. Anything you want. Her lips part, a reckless light flaring in her green eyes. And if I don't, then you work for me for the next 3 years without a single question. I own your professional soul. She doesn't hesitate. She turns back to the terminal, her fingers flying across the keys. For the next hour, the server room becomes a battlefield of logic. She finds the gap at 412 AM. A final, decisive click of the enter key, and the screen floods with a blinding white light. Success. But as the data populates, Elara's breathing hitches. She freezes, the color draining from her face. I watch the names scroll. I had seen her pause over Av Holdings on Tuesday, a faint, flickering ghost in the ledgers that she had desperately tried to write off as a coincidence or a cruel joke. I had watched her spend 72 hours hunting for a reason to believe it wasn't him. But then the final encryption layer peels back, and there it is. Not just the name of the shell company, but Arthur's private digital signature, a forensic fingerprint that only the two of them know. My senior director hasn't just been skimming. He's been funneling Sterling-Vane capital into a rival syndicate to buy his own protection from the federal probe. He's been selling the Vane family secrets to the highest bidder, and he's been using Elara's placement in the firm as a smokescreen. The silence in the server room turns from electric to lethal. I feel the shift in my own blood, the cold, calculated readiness for a purge. Arthur Vance is a loyal soldier who just signed his own death warrant. Elara spins the chair around, her face flushed with a desperate, radiant heat. She looks at me, and I see the moment she realizes that I've already seen the list. I see the moment she realizes what happens to men who betray the Vane name. "I win," she breathes, her voice a soft, trembling attempt to regain the momentum. I stand over her, the blue lead light catching the silver scar at my brow. "I let you win, little accountant. But the prize you just found is a blade that cuts both ways. I expect her to ask for his life. I expect her to play the good daughter one last time. Instead, she stands up, her body vibrating with a primal electric tension. She reaches out, her hand trembling as she grips the lapels of my charcoal coat, pulling me down into her orbit. The distance between us vanishes. She is choosing a side. "Take me home, Silas." The request is a jagged edge against the silence of the vault. She is choosing the predator over the family that used her as a pawn. My restraint shatters. I grip the back of her neck, my thumb carving a path of fire along her jaw, and pull her into a kiss that tastes of caffeine, rebellion, and a hunger that has been decades in the making. The world outside this room evaporates. The server room is cold, but as I lift her onto the polished steel desk, The only thing that matters is the heat of her skin and the knowledge that I am never letting her go back to the world that betrayed her. Chapter 13. Elara. The silence in the back of the SUV is not the empty, clinical quiet of the server room. It is a heavy, pressurized atmosphere, thick with the scent of ozone, expensive leather, and the metallic tang of the adrenaline still singing in my blood. Outside the tinted windows, Manhattan is a blurred motherboard of neon and shadow, the city's restless energy feeling like a distant, frantic hum compared to the man sitting inches away from me. Silas has not moved since we left the tower. He sits with a terrifying stillness, his profile a jagged line of obsidian and granite against the passing streetlights. His hand, the same hand that just claimed the back of my neck with such violent precision, rests flat on his thigh. The dark ink of his tattoos looks like a warning in the dim light of the cabin. The ink seems to shift with every rhythmic flicker of the streetlights, a story of shadows I'm only beginning to read. I can still taste him. Caffeine, bourbon, and a hunger that felt like a reckoning. My pulse refuses to normalize, hitting my ribs with a rhythmic, desperate thud that matches the ticking of the clock in my head. I saw the list. The name of Holdings is burned into my retinas, a glowing blue brand of betrayal. My stepfather, the man who walked me through the conservatory of our Heights apartment and lectured me on the sanctity of numbers, is a thief. He is a traitor. He is the reason I've spent my life looking for a safety that doesn't exist. And looking at the set of Silas's jaw, I know Arthur Vance is currently a dead man walking. The realization should provoke a sense of grief, or at least a flicker of filial loyalty. Instead, I feel a cold, crystalline clarity. Every fatherly piece of advice Arthur ever gave me now tastes like ash. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a forensic shield. He didn't want me at Sterling-Vane to succeed. He wanted me there to be the distraction while he bled the family dry. You're thinking about the logistics of his disappearance. The voice is a low, raspy friction that makes the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Silas doesn't turn his head. He remains fixed on the road ahead, but his awareness of me is absolute. It is the awareness of a predator who has finally cornered the only thing in the world he finds interesting. I'm thinking about the fact that he used me, I whisper, my voice sounding foreign, a breathless, jagged edge against the silence of the luxury cabin. He put me in that firm to be his eyes. He didn't want me to have a career. He wanted a Trojan horse. He gambled my reputation and my future to cover his own rot. Arthur has always been a man of varied interests, Silas counters, his tone devoid of any empathy. It is the cold, hard logic of a man who has spent a lifetime navigating the underworld. He thought he could play both sides of the ledger. He thought the Romanovs could offer him a shield that the Vane name couldn't. He believed that his connection to you would make him untouchable. He was wrong. The car pulls into the subterranean garage of his penthouse, the hum of the engine echoing off the reinforced concrete. The doors open with a soft, mechanical hiss, and Silas finally turns to me. His eyes are bottomless, the jagged silver scar at his brow catching the harsh overhead led light and making him look like a vengeful god. "You realized what you did back there, little accountant?" He leans in, the heat radiating from his body an overwhelming surge that makes my knees tremble despite the adrenaline. "You didn't just ask for a ride. You crossed a line that doesn't exist on any ledger. You are officially part of the conspiracy now. You chose the predator over the father. There is no going back to the Heights. There is no going back to the charcoal dress. I chose the truth." I snap, the fire in my gut finally overriding the cold chill of shock. Arthur isn't a father. He's a shell company with a heartbeat. I don't owe my loyalty to a man who sells my peace of mind to the highest bidder. A ghost of a smirk touches Silas's lips, but his eyes remain obsidian. He steps out of the car and reaches back, his hand large and calloused as it envelops mine to pull me onto the concrete. The grip is firm, unyielding, a silent claim that vibrates through every bone in my body. We step into the private elevator, the pressurized climb beginning in total silence. I am a clean ledger no longer. I am a liability. I am an asset. And as the doors slide open to reveal the dark, minimalist sanctuary of his penthouse, I realize I am finally exactly where I belong. The living area is a tomb of gray slate and dark wood, smelling of cedar and the cold efficiency of a world built on power. Silas walks to a sideboard and pours 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass, the clink of ice the only sound in the room. He doesn't offer me a drink. Instead, he reaches into a drawer and pulls out a small, sleek black box. "I ordered a courier to deliver this to your apartment later this morning," he says, sliding the box across the granite island toward me. It is a precise movement, choreographed and clinical. Consider it an early arrival, since the sun is already beginning to threaten the skyline. You won't be returning to the heights for the foreseeable future. Arthur has already alerted his friends that you were the one auditing the books tonight. You are no longer safe in a building that carries his name. I open the box. Inside is a sleek, encrypted phone, a keycard to a private wellness club in Chelsea, and a small, medical-grade hydration pack. "The key is for the club beneath the penthouse," he murmurs, stepping into my space until I can smell the wood smoke and bourbon on his skin. "You will use it. You will sleep. You will let the medical-grade salts settle your system. And on Monday, you will walk into that office and you will look Arthur in the eye while I dismantle his life, piece by piece." I look at the keycard, the plastic cool against my palm. "And Julian? He's going to be at my desk in 3 hours, Silas. He's going to apologize for the club and try to save me again." Silas's jaw locks, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. The mention of the prosecutor brings back the icy, possessive heat that nearly burned the gilded cage to the ground. The prosecutor is an irritant I will deal with when the air is clear. For now, you are under my roof, you are under my protection, and most importantly, Elara, you are under my command. You do not talk to him. You do not listen to his apologies. You are a Vane asset now, and Julian doesn't have the clearance to breathe your air. He reaches up, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw with a deliberate, slow movement that feels like a brand. I should run. I should demand a cab and disappear into the city. But as I look at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I realize the girl who was afraid of the dark died in that server room at 4:12 a.m. I'm the one who commands the shadows now. "I'm not going to sleep, Silas," I say, my voice growing steadier as I lean into his touch, my skin humming with the static charge of his proximity. We have 72 hours before that board meeting. If we're going to dismantle him, I want to be the one who pulls the first thread. I want to see the exact moment he realizes he lost everything the second he underestimated me. A dark, triumphant heat flares in his eyes. He doesn't say a word. He simply turns toward the library, an invitation I've been waiting for since the night at the vault. The war has officially begun. Chapter 14. Elara. The transition from the clinical ozone-heavy air of the Sterling-Vane Tower to the salt-slicked humidity of the Atlantic was a violent, atmospheric snap. One moment, a computer terminal in a Manhattan basement displayed the jagged necrotic arteries of Arthur's shell companies. The next, the interior of a private Gulfstream G650 offered the scent of cedar, chilled champagne, and the cold efficiency of a world built on strategic retreats. Silas is a man of precise, lethal choreography. To the outside world, this is a milestone birthday celebration for my mother, Mia, a grand 72-hour escape to a private island in the Exumas. To the federal agents currently kicking in the doors of the Brooklyn shipping terminal, it is a well-timed disappearance into international waters. To Arthur, it is a luxury victory lap. To the man sitting across from me, it is a cage made of white sand and turquoise water, designed to keep me under his eye while the firm undergoes a systemic bloody purge. The island is a fever dream of white-hot sun and adrenaline. The air is a thick, suffocating weight, carrying the cloying scent of blooming hibiscus and the sharp, metallic tang of the ocean. It should be a paradise, but the atmospheric pressure is combustible. Every rustle of a palm frond is a footstep. Every clink of a crystal glass on the terrace is a hammer cocking. I stand at the edge of the infinity pool. The water is a perfect, unmoving mirror of a cloudless sky, the stiff charcoal suit I wore for the board meeting, a garment Silas had his personal shopper procure to replace the emerald silk he'd discarded, has been traded for a bikini of the same deep hue. The water of the pool is cool against my ankles, yet the static charge vibrating in my marrow remains. Silas's gaze from the shaded terrace above is a physical weight, a predatory heat tracking the movement of my pulse against my throat. He sits with Arthur and a cadre of family directors, nursing a bourbon despite the midday heat. His obsidian eyes hide behind dark lenses. His face is a mask of unyielding granite. He is a king presiding over a court of ghosts. Elara, we need to talk. Properly, away from the noise. The voice is a dull, flat note, shattering the rhythm of the waves hitting the reef. Julian stands 5 feet away. Pink skin betrays his struggle under the unforgiving tropical sun. He is a safe, bureaucratic shadow in a place built for monsters, a man who still thinks he can negotiate with a hurricane. There is nothing left to say, Julian. The horizon, where the blue of the water meets the blue of the sky, is the only stable thing in my field of vision. You should be back in the city, filing your motions and prepping your witnesses. This isn't a playground for the prosecutor's office. I'm trying to save you. He steps closer. The scent of peppermint soap clashes with the salt air, a sterile domestic smell that induces nausea. The raid yesterday, it's just the beginning. Silas Vane is a sinking ship, and he's dragging you down into the engine room. My father has already signed off on the warrants for the logistics wing. If you give me the keys to the ghost loop, I can get you out of this. I can protect you. I finally turn. 3 years of my life were spent trying to love this man. He sees a victim, a good daughter who needs a lighthouse to find her way home. The reality is different. The storm has already broken, and the lightning is preferable to his safety. The navy blazer in his eyes and the light roast coffee in his soul are relics of a life that no longer fits. You can't protect me from a world you don't understand, Julian. You're playing checkers in a room full of people who have already flipped the table. I walk away before the condescension in his eyes turns into a lecture. But as the villa approach nears, a hand catches my elbow. The grip is too tight. Fingers tremble with a frantic, desperate energy. Elara, sweetheart, a word. Arthur pulls me into the heavy, floral shadow of a blooming bougainvillea. His face is a mask of practiced, fatherly concern, but the sweat on his brow has nothing to do with the humidity. He is haggard. The polished veneer of the senior director is cracking under the weight of the list uncovered at 4:12 a.m. Your mother mentioned you've been spending a lot of time in the executive wing lately, working the late shifts. Closely with Silas. His eyes dart toward the terrace, searching for the silhouette of the man who owns him. The firm is in a state of flux, Elara. There are discrepancies being found. Shell companies. Things that could be misconstrued by someone who doesn't understand the family architecture. The name Av Holdings flashes behind my eyes like a strobe light. The secret is a cold, heavy stone in my chest. The numbers don't lie, Arthur. They just take time to align. Silas is very thorough. He leans in. His breath carries the scent of the expensive gin he's been using to steady his nerves since the plane landed. Silas is a dangerous man, Elara. He is the head of a legacy built on blood. If you've seen anything that looks like it involves me, you should come to me first. We're family. We look out for each other. I put you in that firm to keep you safe. The good daughter act is a lead-in weight, a lie worn like a second skin. A thin, chilling smile is all I offer. I'll keep that in mind, Arthur. But right now, the heat is making my head spin. I need some air. I break his hold and head for the trailhead leading away from the villa. My heart hits my ribs like a trapped bird. The clink of crystal, the hollow, high-pitched laughter of my mother, and the frantic, predatory greed of the man who sold my future to a rival syndicate are all noises I need to escape. The hike is a brutal, vertical climb through dense tropical scrub and jagged limestone. The sun is a white-hot hammer. The air grows thinner as the elevation rises. I don't look back until the ridge summit is reached. The villa is a tiny, fragile toy house against the vast, indifferent blue of the Atlantic. Skin is slick with salt and sweat. The emerald silk of the bikini is a vibrant, defiant streak against the gray stone. You're a difficult woman to track when you want to be lost. Silas is standing 10 feet behind me. He has discarded his shirt. Dark ink stands out in stark, lethal relief against bronzed skin, a map of a world I'm only beginning to understand. He belongs to this island, a primitive, unyielding force that the white sand and turquoise water can't tame. The jagged silver scar at his brow is a white line in the sun, a mark of a history never fully shared. I didn't think the directors could be left alone long enough to breathe. My breath hitches as he closes the distance. The space between us vanishes, replaced by a static charge that makes the air feel heavy. The directors are currently occupied with the illusion of safety and the bottom of a bottle. He steps into my space. The scent of wood smoke and rain, slicked asphalt, his scent erases the tropical flowers. I wanted the reality. I wanted the only thing on this island that isn't a lie. He leads the way down a hidden path on the far side of the ridge. The terrain grows steeper, more treacherous until the sound of the surf becomes a rhythmic roar. We emerge into a hidden cove, a crescent of black sand tucked between two towering limestone cliffs. The world cannot see us here. The security globes, the federal agents, and the betrayals of the villa are 1,000 miles away. The masks finally slip. Silas turns. Obsidian eyes burn with a white-hot intensity that makes the sun feel cold. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't have to. He reaches out. His hand is large and calloused as it cups the back of my neck. His thumb traces the frantic drumbeat line of my jaw. You were talking to the prosecutor. The words are a low, dangerous vibration against my skin. And you were talking to the traitor. You're playing a dangerous game, little accountant. I was doing exactly what you told me to do. My spine hits the sun-warmed stone of the cliff behind me. The heat of the rock and the heat of his body trap me in a localized storm. I was playing the part. I was being the good daughter while I watched him sweat. The part is over. Elara. He leans in. His chest brushes against the emerald silk of my bikini. The contact electrifies me from the inside out. In this cove, there is no Sterling-Vane. There is no Arthur. There is only the truth of what happened in that server room at 4:12 a.m. He pulls me into a kiss that tastes of salt, rebellion, and a hunger that has been decades in the making. The world outside disappears. There is only the roar of the Atlantic, the heat of the black sand, and the knowledge that I am finally, irrevocably, done being safe. Chapter 15. Silas. The air in the cove is a stagnant, humid weight, thick with the scent of salt, crushed limestone, and the electric charge radiating from Elara's skin. She stands pressed against the sun-warmed cliff, her breathing a frantic, shallow rhythm that hitches against my chest. The emerald silk of her bikini is a vibrant fracture against the gray stone. I keep my hand anchored at the nape of her neck, my thumb tracing the rapid-fire beat of her pulse. She isn't just trembling from the kiss. There is a jagged, cold edge to her gaze, a shadow that has nothing to do with the limestone walls towering over us. The server room wasn't the first time I felt watched, she breathes, her voice a thin, fractured thing that barely carries over the rhythmic roar of the Atlantic. I don't pull away. I lean in until the jagged silver scar at my brow nearly brushes hers. The university glitch. Her eyes widen, the green of her irises swallowed by pupils that dilate into obsidian voids. How do you? I don't believe in coincidences, Elara, especially not digital ones. She shudders, her fingers digging into the muscle of my forearms, her grip desperate and bruising. It was 3 years ago, senior year. I woke up and every account I owned was a 0. My transcripts, my savings, my identity, everything was replaced by a single, looping line of code. A digital ghost that followed me into every terminal I touched. It wasn't just theft. It was an erasure. I spent 6 months living as a phantom because the police couldn't find a fingerprint in a cloud of encrypted smoke. She looks away, her jaw tightening until the bone sharpens. I moved to San Francisco to outrun it. I became a forensic accountant to learn how to build walls that couldn't be climbed. But I still feel the eyes, Silas, even in the light. I reach out, my hand large enough to cup her face, forcing her back into my orbit. The rage in my gut is a cold, clinical thing. A predator catching the scent of a rival. The man who touched her peace 3 years ago isn't a ghost. He is a contractor for the Romanovs, a specialist in psychological leverage that Arthur was foolish enough to put on a retainer. It wasn't a glitch, I rasp, the words a low friction against the salt air. It was a signature. The man who dismantled your life in Palo Alto is the same architect Arthur hired to mirror the Sterling-Vane ledgers. He's been in your periphery for 1,000 days, waiting for Arthur to give him the signal to finish the job. Her breath hitches, a soft, broken sound that makes the ink on my skin burn. You knew. I've been tracking the Palo Alto server logs for 3 weeks. I don't offer pity, Elara. Pity is for the weak, and you are the only thing in this city I've found that refuses to break. I lean in, my lips grazing the shell of her ear. I offer you total erasure. Not of your identity, but of his. By the time we leave this island, the man who stole your peace will be a memory buried under a mountain of his own decrypted sins. I will burn his world until there isn't a single line of code left to find you. The tremor in her body shifts. The fear is still there, but it is being consumed by a dark, reckless heat. She turns her face into my palm, her lips brushing the calloused skin of my thumb. Do it, she whispers. Burn it all. Elara. The return to the villa is a blur of vertical stone and the rhythmic thud of my heart hitting my ribs. The hike that felt like a struggle an hour ago is now a primal necessity. I move through the tropical scrub with a frantic energy, the salt on my skin itching, the heat of Silas's presence behind me a physical force pushing me forward. We reach the ridge summit. The villa below is a sprawling white marble cage, lit by the orange fire of a dying sun. The directors are still on the terrace, their hollow laughter and clinking crystal a distant, pathetic static. Julian is there, a safe navy blazer ghost, looking for a girl who no longer exists. We don't go to the terrace. Silas leads me through a side entrance, the cool, conditioned air of the villa hitting my damp skin like a shock. We move through the shadows of the vaulted hallway, the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax masking the ozone and salt we brought back from the cove. He stops at the door to his private wing. The lock turns with a heavy, industrial thud, a sound of finality, the tension that has been vibrating in the marrow of my bones since the gilded cage, since the week of ghosting, since the 412M reveal in the server room, finally snaps. I don't wait for him to command me. I don't wait for the rules to break. I reach out, my fingers trembling as I grip the lapels of his charcoal jacket, pulling him into my space until the scent of wood smoke and bourbon erases the island. No more games, Silas, I breathe, the words a jagged edge against the silence of the room. No more masks. No more ledgers. The restraint in his eyes, the fortress he has spent 35 years building, shatters. He doesn't answer. He grips the back of my head, his fingers tangling in the salt-matted waves of my hair, and pulls me into a kiss that tastes of caffeine, rebellion, and a hunger that has been decades in the making. The world outside disappears. The federal probe, the Romanovs, the betrayal of my stepfather, it all evaporates into the heat radiating between us. He lifts me, my legs locking around his waist, the emerald silk of the bikini a vibrant fracture against the dark wool of his suit. He carries me toward the bed, the movement fluid and predatory. The shadows of the room wrap around us, a dark sanctuary where the clean ledger is finally, irrevocably ruined. The fire he promised to use on my enemies is the same one currently consuming us both. Tonight, the accountant isn't looking for a balance. Tonight, I am looking to lose myself in the only truth I've ever found. As we sink into the dark silk of the sheets, the only sound in the room is the rhythmic roar of the Atlantic outside and the heavy, synchronized thud of two hearts finally finding the same frequency. The shadows command us now. Chapter 16. Elara. The scent of fresh white paint and industrial floor wax is a sharp, clinical contrast to the lingering memory of salt air and Silas's skin. It took 2 weeks of relentless, jagged negotiations and a cold war fought across his granite kitchen island to reach this compromise. Silas had initially refused to let me out of the penthouse, citing the mounting federal pressure and the family unrest, but I had forced the move by threatening to quit the audit entirely. He finally conceded, but only after he personally negotiated the lease for this specific floor in Tribeca, a building owned by a Vane subsidiary with a reinforced security perimeter and a private elevator bank. This studio is a fortress of my own making, 42 floors above the cobblestone streets. It is a minimalist box of glass, exposed brick, and a silence so profound it makes my ears ring. The space is small, barely a fraction of the square footage of the Vane penthouse, but every inch of it belongs to me. Moving out was a quiet, jagged war. Silas didn't yell. He simply stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his living room, his back a wall of unyielding charcoal wool, watching the city as if he were calculating the exact trajectory of my departure. I saw the muscle in his jaw lock when I handed him the keycard to his private wing. He hates the lack of control, the way I am intentionally stepping out of the shadow he's cast over me since the vault. But beneath the predatory tension, a glint of respect remains, a recognition of the spine he's spent weeks testing. I am standing on my own 2 feet. Or at least, I am trying to convince my nervous system that the floor isn't made of glass. The forensic audit of Arthur's collapse continues at the firm, but tonight, the work is personal. I sit at my desk, the surface a slab of reclaimed wood that still smells of the sawmill. My laptop hums, a low, rhythmic vibration beneath my palms. I am rebuilding the walls. I am layering encryption like armor, stitching together a digital identity that doesn't rely on the Vane family legacy. The city outside is a motherboard of neon and shadow. Rain begins to smear the glass, turning the lights of the financial district into long, bleeding streaks of amber and violet. I reach for the remote, clicking on the wall-mounted television, not for the news, but for the white noise of a nature documentary to drown out the sound of my own thoughts. The screen flickers. The image of a deep-sea trench appears, the water a murky, suffocating blue. But the audio doesn't follow. The rhythmic pulse of sonar fills the room, growing louder, sharper, until it vibrates in the marrow of my bones. Then, the screen bleeds to black. A single line of deep crimson text scrolls across the mirrored surface, the letters jagged and flickering with a familiar parasitic rhythm. Did you think the island was a sanctuary, Elara? The air in the studio turns to ice. My lungs seize, the breath hitching in a throat that feels suddenly too tight. I know this code. I know the way the characters tilt, the specific, arrogant flourish of the syntax. It is the signature from Palo Alto. It is the digital ghost that haunted my senior year, the monster that stole my peace and left me a phantom in my own life. The text shifts, the crimson letters glowing with a predatory brightness. Arthur was cheap. But his secrets were expensive. He sold the key to your front door for a second chance that doesn't exist. The realization hits like a physical blow to the solar plexus. Arthur. Even in his ruin, he found a way to use me as currency. He didn't just embezzle funds. He traded my location and my digital safety to the one man he knew I feared, all to buy a moment of leverage against Silas. A new line appears, slow and deliberate. I am in the system, little accountant. I am the mirror. I am the lights. The overhead LED panels flicker once, twice, and then die, plunging the studio into a suffocating gray darkness lit only by the crimson glow of the screen. The electronic lock on the front door chimes, a soft mechanical click, signaling that the bolt has been retracted from 1,000 miles away. Or from the hallway. My heart hits my ribs like a trapped bird. I reach for the burner phone Silas gave me, my fingers trembling so violently I nearly drop the device. I don't call the police. They can't fight a ghost. I press the only speed dial contact on the encrypted network. Silas. I breathe into the receiver, the word a fractured plea. Stay away from the windows, Elara. Get into the bathroom. Lock the secondary bolt. His voice is no longer the raspy, controlled friction of the CEO. It is a low, lethal growl that vibrates with a frequency I've only heard in the shadows of the docklands. He doesn't ask what happened. He doesn't ask for a location. He already knows. I scramble across the dark room, my heels catching on the rug. I lock myself in the clinical, marble-lined bathroom, sliding the heavy manual bolt into place. I sink to the floor, my back against the cold stone, clutching the phone as if it's a lifeline. The sound of the television in the other room grows louder. The monster is playing the audio of my own university graduation, the cheers, the applause, distorting it until it sounds like a choir of screaming ghosts. Minutes feel like hours. The silence of the hallway outside is absolute, a vacuum waiting to be filled. Then, the sound of the front door hitting the wall echoes through the studio. It isn't a cautious entry. It is a violent, structural breach. The sound of heavy, rhythmic boots crunches over the glass of a shattered vase. There is no shouting. There is only the clinical, efficient sound of a room being cleared. A single, heavy thud follows, the sound of a body hitting the floor, a sharp gasp of pain cut short by a suffocating grip. Elara, it's over. I slide the bolt back, my hand shaking. I open the door to a world that has been transformed. Silas stands in the center of my studio. He has discarded his charcoal jacket. His white dress shirt is unbuttoned at the throat, the sleeves rolled up, to reveal the dark, muscular ink of his forearms. He isn't the businessman anymore. He is the head of the Vane family, a man who deals in blood and absolute erasure. In the corner, a man I don't recognize is pinned to the floor by two of Silas's enforcers, a black bag already being pulled over his head. Silas doesn't look at him. He doesn't look at the flickering crimson screen. He looks only at me. His obsidian eyes are wide, burning with a jagged white-hot fury that makes the air in the room feel thin. He crosses the space in 2 strides, his hands catching my face with a grip that is firm, possessive, and entirely unyielding. He touched the mirror, Silas rasps, his breath smelling of wood smoke and cold intent. He touched the walls of the home I let you build. Arthur sold me, I whisper, the salt of tears finally hitting my lips. He sold the access. Arthur is a dead man, Silas counters, his thumb grazing the line of my jaw, grounding me in the reality of his presence. And the ghost on that screen is about to learn that there are no hiding places left in this city. I'm going dark, Elara. I'm taking the family into the streets tonight. By morning, the Palo Alto files will be the only thing left of him. He doesn't ask if I'm coming with him. He simply tucks me under his arm, his body a solid, impenetrable shield against the dark. We walk out of the studio, leaving the paint and the wax behind. The independence was a beautiful dream, but as the elevator descends toward the black SUVs waiting at the curb, I realize that in a world of monsters, the only safety is standing beside the predator who has decided you belong to him. Chapter 17. Silas. The air in the docklands is a toxic slurry of salt water, diesel exhaust, and the copper tang of fear. It is a stagnant, heavy atmosphere that clings to the back of the throat, tasting of rust and old buried sins. Here, beneath a derelict warehouse where the Hudson laps greedily at rotting timber, the city's polished glass towers are a distant, irrelevant myth. The basement is a tomb of damp concrete and low-hanging shadows. A single, naked bulb flickers overhead, casting jagged, rhythmic shadows that dance across the bruised face of the man Zip, tied to a rusted steel chair. This is the monster. The digital ghost who disassembled Elara's life in Palo Alto. Up close, stripped of his encrypted firewalls and crimson text, he is nothing but a frantic, sweating variable in a very simple equation. I have discarded my jacket and my tie. The sleeves of my white dress shirt are rolled past my elbows, revealing the dark, muscular ink of my forearms, tattoos that look like a story of violence written in shadows. I can feel the weight of the blade in my hand, the cold steel a natural extension of my own jagged intent. I am no longer the CEO. I am no longer the architect of strategic buyouts. I have regressed to the primitive, lethal core of the Vane name. This is the man I usually keep locked behind a fortress of charcoal wool and high-frequency trades. But tonight, the fortress has been breached. He touched the mirror. He touched the walls of the home I let her build. I lean in, the blade's edge grazing the soft, vulnerable skin of his throat. His pulse hammers against the steel, a frantic, pathetic drumbeat of survival. Arthur sold her location for a second chance, I rasp. The words a low, lethal friction that vibrates through the damp air. And you bought it because you thought I was just a man in a suit. You thought the digital world had no physical consequences. The man tries to speak, but the sound is a choked, liquid whimper. I press the blade a fraction deeper, just enough to draw a single, thin line of crimson. The sight of his blood doesn't satisfy me. It only feeds the cold, white-hot fury that has been burning in my marrow since I saw that TV screen flicker in Tribeca. I want to erase him, not just his data, but his breath. I want to turn his world to ash until there isn't a single line of code or a single memory left of the fear he put in her eyes. The heavy iron door at the top of the stairs groans, a sharp industrial screech that cuts through the hum of the warehouse. Footsteps follow. They aren't the rhythmic, heavy thud of my enforcers. They are lighter, more deliberate. Elara. I don't turn. I keep my focus locked on the monster's eyes, watching the terror in his pupils dilate as the shadows behind me shift. Silas. Stop. The voice is a soft, steady friction that settles in the room like a calming agent. I feel her presence before I see her, the scent of vanilla and rain cutting through the diesel and the blood. She walks into the circle of light, her gaze dropping to my hands, then to the man in the chair. She sees the blood on my knuckles. She sees the primitive, unyielding edge of the man she chose to stay with. "He doesn't get to take this, too," she says, her voice growing stronger as she steps into my space. She doesn't recoil. She doesn't look away from the gore. She looks only at me, her green eyes bright with a crystalline clarity. "He's already dead, Silas. Look at him. He's nothing." She reaches out, her hand small and warm as she covers my grip on the blade. The contact is an electric surge, a grounding wire that pulls me back from the edge of the abyss. "If you kill him here, in the dark, he wins. He turns you into the very thing I've spent my life running from. He takes your soul, and I won't let him have it." The rage in my gut, the cold, clinical need for a purge shudders. Her touch is a physical barrier between the predator and the prey. I look at her, seeing the woman who commanded the shadows in the server room, and I realize she isn't asking for mercy. She is asking for my survival. "Arthur is the one who opened the door," she whispers, her thumb grazing the back of my hand. "Let's end it the right way. Not with a blade, but with the truth." The tension in my arm snaps. I pull the blade back, the steel catching the flickering light one last time before I fold it. I reach for the encrypted tablet resting on a nearby crate. Elara takes it from me. Her fingers fly across the screen with a fluid, lethal grace. She isn't just auditing, she is stitching together a digital gift wrap of every transaction Arthur made with the Romanovs, every encrypted threat this ghost sent to Palo Alto, and every cent of the Vane family capital currently sitting in Av Holdings' sub-accounts. "It's done," she says, a sharp, decisive click echoing through the basement. The file is in the prosecutor's inbox. Julian's father won't be able to bury this, not even to save his own reputation. I look at the man in the chair, then back at Elara. She has dismantled a syndicate and a stepfather with a few lines of code and a backbone of steel. She didn't need a savior. She needed a partner. Arthur is finished. I rasp, the fury in my blood finally cooling into a dark, triumphant satisfaction. And your ghost is going to spend the rest of his life in a clinical white room where the only thing he can hack is his own heartbeat. I signal to my men in the shadows. They move in to handle the logistics of the handoff, their movements silent and efficient. I take Elara's hand, our fingers interlacing. The copper and the diesel are fading, replaced by the scent of the coming dawn. We walk out of the basement, leaving the blood and the sins behind. The war for the Vane name is over. The war for Arthur's legacy is won. And as we climb the stairs toward the morning air, I realize that the clean ledger I was so afraid of ruining has become the only thing in this city worth protecting. Tonight, the predator didn't just reclaim his territory. He found the woman who commands it. Chapter 18. Elara. 1 year has passed since the basement in the Docklands, and the silence of the Vane penthouse no longer feels like a pressurized vacuum. It feels like home. The dark charcoal duvet and the polished concrete ceilings are the architecture of my sanctuary now, a place where the scent of sandalwood and wood smoke is the only air I care to breathe. I've traded the good daughter armor for a sovereignty of my own making. My firm, Vance Forensic, occupies a sleek suite 10 floors below Silas's office. I don't just audit his books anymore. I've spent the last 12 months surgically legalizing the Vane legacy, turning shadow assets into a fortress of legitimate power. Arthur is a ghost. Julian is a distant Navy blazer memory, and the monster from Palo Alto is rotting in a federal facility where the walls are as thick as his encrypted lies. The hum of the G650's engines is a low rhythmic vibration beneath my feet as we cruise at 40,000 feet. The cabin is filled with the scent of white lilies and the expensive, salt-crusted air of the Maldives waiting for us below. If you stare any harder at that spreadsheet, Silas is going to have the pilot jettison your laptop into the Atlantic. Jax is sprawled across the cream leather sofa opposite me, wearing a silk kimono that is a violent explosion of neon peonies. He sips a martini, his pink-framed glasses sliding down his nose as he offers a look of pure theatrical judgment. I'm just finishing the final reconciliation for the logistics merger, I murmur, though I can feel the heat of Silas's gaze from the wet bar. You're being a bore, Jax counters, gesturing with his glass toward the back of the cabin. Look at him. He's been standing there for 20 minutes, vibrating with brooding husband energy. He looks like he's calculating the exact number of seconds it will take to throw me off this plane, so he can have you to himself. It's exhausting, Elara. Truly, the man is a walking thunderstorm in a custom suit. I look up as Silas closes the distance. He has discarded his tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned to reveal the dark, muscular ink of the tattoos on his chest. The silver scar at his brow is a permanent, beautiful fracture in the granite of his face. He doesn't look at Jax. He doesn't look at the champagne. He looks only at me, his obsidian eyes burning with the same white-hot intensity that nearly consumed me in the server room. The merger can wait. Silas rasps, his hand large and calloused as it closes over my laptop, shutting the lid with a final, mechanical click. The ledger is balanced, Elara. For the next week, the only numbers I want you calculating are the hours until the moon rises. Jax cackles, a sharp, barking sound that makes the flight attendant smile. See? Brooding. Possessive. King of the underworld. I'll be in the cockpit seeing if the pilot wants a martini. Try not to break the furniture. The arrival in the Maldives is a sensory transition from the metallic efficiency of the jet to the primitive, overwhelming beauty of the Indian Ocean. The air is a thick, humid embrace, smelling of salt, frangipani, and the coming night. We reach the private villa, a structure of glass and dark timber perched over the turquoise void, just as the sun begins to bleed into the horizon. By midnight, the world has disappeared. The beach is a crescent of silver sand lit only by a massive, low-hanging moon that turns the water into a sheet of hammered mercury. The wind is a soft friction against my skin, carrying the rhythmic roar of the reef. I am barefoot, the silk of a white slip dress rustling against my thighs, a clean ledger in a world that finally feels right. Silas stands at the water's edge. He has shed the corporate armor, his feet sinking into the cool sand. He looks like the man from the cove, a primitive, unyielding force that belongs to the dark. I walk toward him, my heart hitting my ribs with a steady, triumphant thud. I am no longer the girl running from a glitch. I am the woman who built a fortress out of the shadows. I spent my life convinced that every person had a price, Silas says, his voice a low, raspy vibration that competes with the surf. He doesn't turn as I reach him, his gaze fixed on the black horizon. I thought the world was just a series of hostile takeovers and successful lies. I built a throne out of secrets because I thought the dark was the only place I could breathe. He turns then, and the look in his eyes makes the breath hitch in my throat. It isn't the predator anymore. It is something much more terrifying. It is a man who has found a truth he can't control. And then you walked into the vault, he murmurs, closing the distance until the heat of his body erases the midnight chill. A clean ledger in a city of forgeries. You showed me that the shadows aren't a place to hide. They're a place to rule. He sinks to one knee in the silver sand, a movement of such deliberate, staggering surrender that the world seems to go silent. He doesn't pull out a velvet box. He reaches into his pocket and produces a heavy raw diamond set in a band of blackened platinum, a stone as jagged and unyielding as the man holding it. You are the only truth I've ever found in a world of lies, Elara. I don't want an intern. I don't want a liability. I want a partner. He looks up at me, the moon catching the silver line of his scar. Be my sovereign. Command the dark with me. Be the ink on every page I write until the ledger is finally closed. The salt air hits my lips as I smile, the tears finally breaking. I don't think about Julian. I don't think about Arthur. I think about the girl who looked into a mirrored TV screen and saw a monster, and I realize she's gone. In her place is a woman who isn't afraid of the lightning. Yes, I breathe, the word a soft, decisive click against the roar of the ocean. He slides the ring onto my finger, a cold, heavy weight that feels like a brand and a promise. He stands, pulling me into a kiss that tastes of salt, rebellion, and a future we built out of the wreckage of our pasts. The shadows are all around us, thick and beautiful, stretching across the black water toward a horizon we no longer fear. I am Elara Vane. I am a forensic architect. I am the sovereign of the dark. And as Silas pulls me closer, the only sound left in the world is the heavy, synchronized thud of two hearts finally, irrevocably, at peace. The ledger is balanced.